Change slides, Tom. So just let me note the arrangement for today's virtual meeting. All attendee lines are muted upon entry. Public statements will be accepted at the end of the meeting. Participants who pre-registered to speak will be given first priority, and other statements will be accepted as time allows. The chat will be reviewed following the meeting. For technical difficulties, please do call 1-800-342-3330. Panelists in particular should take note of this number in case you run into any issues going down the line. We do have a court reporter present. We will be recording today's meeting. We'll make the video and transcript available to the public of this meeting on the Department of Public Services website. Next slide, please. Before I take the roll call of the members, I'd like to recognize a few folks. First, I'd like to thank Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, and Congressman Jones and their staff for their continued engagement and support of our work. While they're not officially members of our task force, they are definitely our partners, and they deliver for the community, as evidenced by their recent announcement of a new federal assessment of the Enbridge gas pipeline in the vicinity of Indian Point. The pipeline issue is a continued source of concern in the community, and bringing additional federal resources and attention to the matter is welcome. We're looking forward to learning more about the assessment as the work gets underway, and I'm sure this will be a topic for a future meeting. Next, I'd like to introduce Rory Christian. He was named chair of the Public Service Commission on September 30th by Governor Kathy Hochul, and I want to welcome Chair Christian. We're also joined by one of our commissioners at the PSC, Diane Berman. Welcome, Commissioner Berman. And most importantly, I'd like to thank the very engaged members of the public who attend our meetings. And they ask us tough questions, and they are holding all of us accountable. And it's not always easy to be on the receiving end of tough questions, but the truth is this kind of civic engagement really does help the government do a better job, and ultimately helps the companies and the community do a better job. So thank you to our audience tonight. So now to the roll call. There are a lot of us, and we have a big agenda, so I'd like to kind of help with it for efficiency's sake and go through the roll call, calling on each of you to just introduce yourself, name and title. So from the governor's office, do we have Raj?
Yeah, hi, this is Rajiv Shah, Assistant Counsel to Governor Hochul for Energy, Environment, and Agriculture.
Thanks, Raj. Do we have Dan Fuller with us?
Yep. Dan Fuller, Deputy Secretary for Education in the Chamber.
Thank you. Anyone else on from the Chamber? From the State Senate?
Pete Harcum here, 40th Senate District.
Thank you, Senator. From the Assembly?
Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff, 95th Assembly District.
Good to see you. From the County Executive's Office?
Hi, Susan Spear, Deputy Commissioner, Westchester County Department of Emergency Services.
Great. Hi, Susan. Town of Cortland? Supervisor Puglisi, are you with us? I'll come back around to Supervisor.
Can you hear me? Linda.
There you are. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Hi.
Linda Puglisi, Supervisor, Town of Cortland.
Thank you. Village of Buchanan?
Teresa Knickerbocker, Mayor, Village of Buchanan.
Hello, Mayor.
Hi.
Hendrick Hudson School District?
Joseph Hochreiter, Superintendent of the Hendrick Hudson School District.
Do we have our county legislators?
Catherine Borgia, County Legislator, LD9.
Welcome. I don't know that we've seen Colin Smith join yet. Colin, are you with us? Okay. I'd like to turn to labor, starting with the Teamsters. Lou? Tom? Tom Carey, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Bill, are you with us?
Yeah, I hear you. Bill Smith, Vice President, Utility Workers Union, Local 1-2.
Thank you. I'll try again for Lou.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi Lou. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Louis Buchanan, President and Principal Officer, Teamsters 456.
Great, good to see you. Okay, now on to the state agencies. I'll start with the Department of Public Service, and we have a lot of staff with us tonight, so I will just introduce you all. First, I'm Tom Congdon, Executive Deputy. John Sipos is with us. He's the Deputy Counsel to our agency and also Counsel to the Task Force and Decommissioning Oversight Board. Tom Kazmarek, Policy Advisor at DPS and the Executive Director of the Task Force and Oversight Board. Bridget Freimeyer, a Utility Supervisor in our Office of Resiliency and Emergency Preparedness and our nuclear expert. Kevin Speicher is the Chief of our Pipeline Safety and Reliability in the Office of Gas Pipeline Safety. Suresh Thomas, also with our gas safety team, and Arpit Mehta, also with the gas pipeline safety team. Thank you all for joining us. Did I miss anyone other than who I already introduced, Chair Christian and Commissioner Berman and staff? Did I miss anyone else from the agency? So with that, I'll turn to Department of Environmental Conservation.
Good afternoon, Kelly Turturro. I'm the Regional Director for DEC's Hudson Valley office.
Hey, Kelly, Department of Labor.
Good afternoon, Orville Abrahams, Deputy Commissioner for Workforce Development. Karen Coleman will be joining us shortly.
Okay, thank you. Department of State.
Mark Patterson, Deputy Secretary for the Department of State.
Tax and Finance.
Hi, Scott Palladino, Deputy Commissioner, Office of Tax Policy Analysis at the Tax Department.
Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services.
Jennifer Waka, Deputy Director with the State Office of Emergency Management in the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services.
Great. ESD.
Good afternoon, Tom Scaglione, Mid-Hudson Regional Director, and I'll turn it over to Vincent.
Yes, Vincent Rabish here, Senior VP for Energy.
And the New York Power Authority. Okay, I'll skip them. NYSERDA.
Good afternoon, Elise Peterson, Senior Advisor for Nuclear Coordination and Radioactive Waste Policy and designated New York State Liaison to the NRC.
And do I have anyone else from the state agencies? So that represents the membership of the Indian Point Closure Task Force. All of these folks also sit on the Decommissioning Oversight Board, and we have a couple of additional members I'd like to introduce at this time. For the Oversight Board, we have Dave Lockbaum. Dave?
Dave Lockbaum, a Technical Advisor to the Oversight Board.
Thank you, Dave. And I'm not sure Richard Webster was going to be able to join us this evening, but he thought he might send a designee from Riverkeeper. Do we have anyone from Riverkeeper on the line?
Yes, Victoria Laring, Staff Attorney with Riverkeeper. Hopefully Richard should be able to join towards the end of the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you and welcome. Did I miss anyone from the task force that would like to introduce themselves? Okay, next slide, please. So we have a lot to cover this evening. As usual, we'll start with some Indian Point Closure Task Force business, where we'll get some updates on labor from our Department of Labor. We'll go over the status of the Cessation Fund, and then I will be providing an update on the Community and Environmental Benefit Fund. Then we'll turn over to Decommissioning Oversight Board activities. After quick updates from me, I have requested a number of presentations. First, I'm going to ask Enbridge to go out of order. There were some recent questions raised this week about some construction activity in the community. And so yesterday I asked Enbridge to join us this evening, and they'll speak to that work. We have a number of agency presentations on oversight, and then we'll end with a Holtec presentation. Next slide, please. So first I'm going to ask Orville to give us an update on labor. Orville?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Not going to go through and read every slide, every word of this slide, but we've been engaged with reemployment services for the employees prior to the start of decommissioning. 93 employees provided reemployment services, including dedicated workshops to help prepare employees with their job search efforts. To date, 11 employees have been provided unemployment insurance. In the beginning of the month, 308 affected employees were given intensive job placement services in a mailing sent to them so that they could take advantage of that. For those affected employees, we have information from the Department of Labor. We're also conducting calls and sending emails trying to connect and provide assistance as needed. On October 7th, an additional outreach efforts have brought the following information: 20 employees interested for our reemployment services. 8 have returned to work. 8 have retired. Next slide. Our trade adjustment assistant petition was accepted on March 20th, 2021. So that could provide up to $25,000 in training for each affected employee. So we continue to engage and work with the former Entergy employees to educate them on all the benefits of this program and how to apply, providing information on continuing education and potential training opportunities using this act, and then being a liaison between them and higher education institution to explore credit transfers and degree attainment. To date, 391 Entergy employees received an application to apply for the TAA program. 25 attended a one-on-one informational appointments to learn more about the program. And to date, 6 training plans in this program have been approved. Next slide, please. We remain in contact with the HR manager at Holtec. Out of the 300 former Entergy employees who stayed on with Holtec to work on the decommissioning, 22 have voluntarily left. Those positions have been backfilled with former Entergy employees. And you can see the rest. I'll skip to that last bullet. In addition to Department of Labor, the HR manager, we provided with resources on job placement services that can be shared with employees who voluntarily separate. And that concludes the report on the workforce development services. I don't think Karen's joined yet, so maybe we can circle back and get the labor relations update.
That would be fine.
Any questions?
Any questions? Thanks, Orville. Tom, can you go to the next slide? Great. Vince, are you on the line to provide an update on the Cessation Fund?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Tom, and good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick update on the status of the Cessation Fund. I'm pleased to announce that the first payment with respect to Indian Point was made from the fund actually yesterday to the village of Buchanan. That was in the amount of $773,568. That is the first of 7 years that the village will be in the program. And I did receive confirmation yesterday that the wire had been completed. So if it, for any reason, has not hit the account, please let me know as soon as possible. My understanding is that Hudson School District will most likely be applying right after the first of the year based on their tax and pilot payment schedule. I believe they will be eligible to apply in January 2022. The last state budget increased authorization for the program to $140 million, and of that, approximately $102 million remains in the program. We have had recent applications from 2 school districts, both in Western New York, both impacted by the closure of 2 coal-fired generation plants, the Cayuga plant and the Somerset plant. And in addition to those 2 new applicants, there have been, over the past 5 years of operation of the program, 5 municipalities that have been engaged. They are all in their 5th year, so they have another 2 years to go in the program, and then will be exiting out. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Vince. I want to give an opportunity, especially the taxing jurisdictions, to ask any questions on the cessation fund. Any questions for Vincent?
No questions, but thank you for the first payment.
Quite welcome.
I'll just observe that, you know, throughout the time of the task force, going back to 2017, you know, this has been an issue of great interest for the task force. When we first started working on these issues, you know, we made note of the program, that it existed, but you know, there was a lot more work to do to ensure that there was sufficient funding available when Indian Point closed, so that the communities could actually draw down the real funds that they were eligible for under the program. And so to see this first payment made, I think, is a really great milestone, and you know, really pleased to see the program actually functioning the way we intended and envisioned it would. So thank you to the village for working with ESD to make sure the application, you know, gave them all the information they needed in order to process the application and get the payment made. And thank you to Vince for the great work at ESD.
Tom, Linda Puglisi.
Yes.
I'm so delighted to see that our friends, our partners in the village got their first installment. That is really terrific. Thank you for your work, to Tom Kay's work, and to all of your colleagues for working on this important subject for us, which we have been stressed about for the last several years, as you know. My question is, 2 questions quickly. How many other entities, school districts, municipalities would be part thereof in being able to tap into this fund? Do you know that number? Besides Cayuga and Somerset?
Well, those are the only 2 facilities that have closed recently, and each of those most likely would have 3 total jurisdictions, similar to the case of Indian Point. There would be a school district, typically a town and a county that were potentially eligible to apply, but we've not received applications yet from any entity but the school districts.
Okay. And then do you anticipate, I know it's a projection, of this being added to each fiscal year? Do you anticipate that?
The authorized budget amount?
Yeah.
Well, this 140 was intended to operate the program over the next 10 years. I imagine that'll be subject to adjustment depending on how much activity there is.
Okay.
So I don't know for a fact that it will be revisited every year, but I would imagine that at some point.
To some degree, and then all the high interest will add to it. I'm being facetious.
Right. Well, I think, Supervisor, I think that the line of questions that you have are actually spot on and exactly what the task force should do, right? So right now we have no reason for concern, but you are right to point out that other communities could come in, and we'd have to evaluate, to the extent that those communities are eligible, how much they might draw down against the authorization, and if that affects the overall availability of funds, for the Indian Point communities, our task force could do the math and make folks aware of that issue. And that's the role we play.
Tom, just quickly, if you could just explain to the public who's listening in, who may not know this, it's not just nuclear, it's other
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. And I think that you're right. There probably are a number of new members in the audience and not as well versed in this. I think someone might have had an open mic there for a second. But anyway, the state legislature actually created a program that is administered by Empire State Development called the Electric Generation Cessation Mitigation Program. And this program was designed in recognition of the transition in the energy system that we're undergoing, recognizing that some power plants will likely be retired in the transition to a clean energy economy, and recognize that many communities, regional economies would be impacted because oftentimes these power plants are very large property tax payers. So when they close and that tax revenue goes away, it could have a potentially devastating impact on the tax base. And so the legislature did create this program several years ago with this in mind. And the program provides eligible communities with up to 7 years of grant assistance that decline over time. First starting, and Vincent, keep me honest here, but starting at 80% of the lost revenue for the taxing jurisdiction in the first year of the loss, and declining by 10 percentage points each year over 7 years. The idea there being that over that 7-year period, the tax base can gradually adjust, hopefully bring in alternative economic development and new tax base while it does so, and reduce the sort of immediate shock that could have otherwise occurred from the closure of a power plant. So that's the background on this program. It was viewed as a very successful program and a good tool to have available for communities like the Indian Point community. But what the task force has done over the past few years is worked with our partners in the legislature and in the governor's office to highlight funding needs so that those would be addressed, action would be taken before this year, which is the first year the taxing jurisdictions are being impacted by the lost revenue from the closure of Indian Point, and when they first became eligible under the program. And so we were just really pleased that, through Senator Harkin's and Assemblywoman Galeff's actions and the governor's office's work, and we took some actions at the PSC to create the funding mechanism, that all of us worked together to really shore up the program and make sure that it was fully funded when Indian Point communities became eligible. I think Sandy Galeff had her hand up.
I do, Tom. I think it's great Buchanan got their first payment, but Hen Hud has to apply in January. Do we have an idea how much money they will be receiving? And what about the town of Cortland and the library district and the county and the fire district? When can they all apply? Is that all January 22?
No, everyone is on a different fiscal year, and the eligibility gets triggered in the first fiscal year following a greater than 20% loss in revenue. And so that's why you're seeing the different application schedules. But each taxing jurisdiction, I believe, knows when they become eligible and are working with ESD to make sure that they know when they can apply. But if there are any questions among any of the taxing jurisdictions, we've been facilitating direct communication with Vincent and his team at ESD.
Right. I would assume the town and the county can apply in January, but Hen Hud School District doesn't have a fiscal year until next July, I think it is, September.
Vincent or Joe, do you want to talk about why January 2022 for the school district?
Yeah, we've been working very closely with Vincent and his team. They've been very responsive. We've already begun planning and ballparking what our allocation will be each of the next number of years. Our fiscal year starts July 1st, so I know we've already begun working on the application to make sure that revenue arrives, it will match with our expenses for 2023 fiscal year. So we're in good shape in terms of time.
And Tom, with the town, Sandy, we have to calculate to see if we meet that threshold of 20% loss of revenue or not. So that's what we will do in December, come January also.
Westchester County will apply in April of 2022.
Excellent. Any other questions on the cessation fund?
I just wanted to make a comment. I know I've thanked Vincent before, but he was very helpful going through the process, the paperwork. I mean, he's been fantastic, and our village administrator, Marcus Serrano, said he was great to work with also. So thank you, because it was, you know, the paperwork and going through the process was a challenge, but I think we got it down now. So, and thank you to everyone that made this happen. Sandy Galiff, Pete Harcum, you know, the state, and you know what, the task force, everyone's been great to work with and very helpful. So it's much appreciated.
Thank you. Okay. So before we get to the next slide, I want to preface it by saying we've been talking for a long time about the community fund. So the cessation fund is a statutory program that's addressing the tax loss. But there's also, I'm sorry, go ahead on the next slide. But there's also a $15 million fund that we've been discussing as a task force for 5 years. And under the terms of the settlement agreement that settled the litigation between the state and Entergy and Riverkeeper, Entergy was required to pay $15 million for projects that would benefit the Hudson River and support the community. We have been discussing an approach to how we could consider projects. We've received a number of proposals from community organizations and from labor unions and from the town and the village. And we've been publicizing those proposals in the task force's annual reports for the past 2 years. And as all of you know, we put those reports out for public comment. So we were inviting comment on everything in the report, including these project proposals. We had a number of working group sessions going back a couple of years now, discussing the merits of these proposals. We've recently gotten to become quite expert in sewer infrastructure because the sewer infrastructure was a priority for both the town and the village, and it's quite impressive coming from the PSC, where we don't do sewer infrastructure, but to learn about the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Environmental Facilities Corporation programs that provide assistance, both technical and financial, to municipalities that are struggling to deal with wastewater infrastructure. So through all of that work over the last few years, I am pleased to report today, next slide, please, that the governor's office, Governor Hochul, has informed a number of entities that they will be receiving awards out of the $15 million community fund. Starting with Buchanan and Cortland, a joint award of $7 million to support 4 phases of sewer infrastructure work, starting on the first phase, which is the kind of keystone project, which everything else will be built on, which is the refurbishment of the Buchanan wastewater treatment plant. This is a project that really is unavoidable for the village. They have to do it under consent order with the DEC. And so the village was facing a very significant capital project right at the same time as they were transitioning the tax base, with the loss of the Entergy payments. And so this was a very high priority project for us. And it was also important because it will then facilitate discussions with the town and within the village itself to talk about new tie-ins into this wastewater treatment plant. The town had successfully designed a new sewer district in Montrose and is applying for funds to support that. Actually received a grant from EFC for that project, but that grant requires an intermunicipal agreement between the town and the village because that's where this new sewer district would tie in. And so the $7 million is going to be used both for the capital needs, but also for the assistance, technical and legal, to the town and the village to get that kind of work done and work together to establish the intermunicipal agreements that are necessary to finally move these projects forward. So we're excited about those. We also are funding $6.5 million to the Hudson River Foundation. This is a program that monitors fish species on the Hudson River. This is work that's been going on for decades and has traditionally been funded by Entergy. And with the closure of the plant and the exit from New York State of Entergy, the organizations that rely on this research were concerned that there wasn't another funding source lined up and that work that's so important to not be disrupted could be. And so this $6.5 million will go to the Hudson River Foundation to ensure that that scientific work continues uninterrupted. The DEC relies on this research as well, and they're going to be intricately involved in managing that program with the Hudson River Foundation. Next is the Hendrick Hudson School District. We've, as you all know, and we're going to talk about this at length under the Decommissioning Oversight Board presentations, but we established at our first meeting a school monitoring working group to identify, ways in which the Decommissioning Oversight Board can advise the school district and community about, how the decommissioning processes could impact the school community. One of the things that we'll be discussing more later that came from that work is a recognition that there may need to be, in the next couple of years, some new types of technology used for monitoring radiation and environmental conditions in the community. And so we wanted to earmark some resources for that future need with an award that we will work with the Hendrick Hudson School District on, $500,000 for monitoring. Next, we provided $250,000 to the Teamsters Local 456, who applied for funds for a training simulator. This will allow their union hall to train their members to get the necessary training they need for a commercial driver's license. And this will then open up new job opportunities for members who may otherwise be displaced from the change in circumstances at Indian Point. And lastly, $750,000 grant to Historic Hudson Valley, which is undertaking very significant modernization and safety enhancements at the Van Cortlandt Manor. This is a project that is also going to secure $3 million in additional federal funds for the project. So the 750 is leveraging a much larger grant to bring into the region. And so we're excited about that as well. So all in all, I think it's a very good package that is providing necessary funds into the community that is addressing direct impacts that were caused by the closure of Indian Point, and really was a pleasure to work with all of the grant recipients to understand their proposals and to get to this point. Before I move on to questions and comments, I want to invite Raj Shah from the governor's office to say a few words. Raj?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I just want to kind of echo what the governor said in her press release, which, you know, she views these awards as part of a comprehensive approach that the state's putting forward to ensure that the closure of Indian Point is really done in a way that doesn't translate into a lack of investment in the region. And I think the governor, you know, the process that this went through is totally aligned with where Governor Hochul views sort of community projects, which is these proposals came from the communities and the community stakeholders, and it was a real bottom-up approach. And I think, you know, she's thrilled. I'm thrilled to see just such a great suite of proposals here, from environmental infrastructure to continuing this important monitoring of the river, to ensuring that the school has resources to adequately monitor potential impacts during decommissioning, job training programs that are going to be so key for the workers here, and historic preservation projects. It's really, really an outstanding package, as Tom said. And I know the governor is really, you know, happy about the way this all shaped up. And so I just want to thank, you know, the town, the village, the foundation, the district, the Teamsters, and Historic Hudson Valley for their partnership in this, and really coming up with some great proposals.
Thank you, Raj. Other comments? Yes, Linda?
Yeah, if I may, on behalf of the town of Cortland and in conjunction with our partners, especially the village of Buchanan and Hendrick Hudson School District, this is a result of what can happen if everybody puts their heads together and they have an ongoing dialogue. They meet regularly, and this is what can be accomplished. And I applaud everybody for their work. There's still work to be done, but this is just a wonderful package that is going to benefit a lot of entities, municipalities, and I thank the governor and all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. Mayor?
Yes. Yes, the Village of Buchanan is extremely grateful, and as you know, because of the closure of Indian Point, the Energy Center, we are in a financial situation, and to bond for the sewer treatment plant on top of that would be impossible. So it was important. We're under DEC consent. The project needs to happen. So I am very pleased with this. I can't tell you how happy I am. It's a great thing for the community, and it will help with our future development, and hopefully we can come to an agreement with the town. We can work together, and but like Linda said, through this whole process with the Indian Point Task Force, and Linda and I have worked closely together. The task force, Tom, you've been great, and the whole task force. Everybody really wanted to help, and you can see when people come together and can work together and can communicate with one another, you can accomplish great things. And I don't want to leave out our local Sandy Galef and Pete Harcum. Very instrumental, everyone, in trying to help us transition. And this money for our sewer plant is just so important. So I'm so appreciative, and I thank everyone for everything they've done.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions or comments?
Tom, just very briefly, I want to echo what everybody said. First, I want to thank the governor for an excellent job, and you and your team. When there's money on the table and people are fighting over money, it is never easy. So I want to thank you and really all the participants for coming together. It's a great balance of environmental protection, economic development. You know, simple fact, in northern Westchester and throughout the Hudson Valley, we cannot do viable economic development with our old septic systems, and that's what this is about. And certainly we've talked about, you know, there's a national shortage of drivers right now, so that hopefully the training system that the Teamsters have requested will be of assistance, not just for the Indian Point employees, but throughout the Hudson Valley region. So I think this strikes a good balance. I want to thank you, thank the governor's office, and everybody involved. Great job.
Thank you, Senator.
Tom, may I say something?
Yes,
Tom?
please. Yes, Louis, go ahead.
Okay, I try to raise my hand, but I don't know how to do this stuff, so I apologize. But I want to thank Governor Hochul, Senator Harkle, and each and every person on this task force for realizing the importance of keeping the workers here in the community, not to send them out elsewhere and keep them here. So timing is everything in life. I was just out with my family, and one of the security officers came up to me. I seen him on the street, and they were worried. They say, I have a job now, but I don't know where it's going to be going forward. My wife just had a new baby, and I don't know what's going on. So now I'll be able to go to this member and say, look, the governor just gave us the grant with the task force, and you'll be able to train now. And with the shortage, like Senator Harkle said, of drivers, timing is everything. So we'll be able to transition some of these officers right into the workforce. So again, the impact of the money for this commercial driver simulator is going to be well worth it, and the rewards are going to be seen actually in our community. So again, I want to thank the governor, thank everybody in this panel, because if we weren't all involved in keeping the community together, this wouldn't have happened. So thank you for everybody's commitment.
Thank you very much, Lou. Really well said.
Thank you. Tom, George Latimer here. Can I share a thought?
Oh, of course. Welcome.
Good to be with you all. You know, obviously, we're very pleased to see that the Hudson River Foundation, that Teamsters Local 456, and Historic Hudson Valley are getting the benefit from this. But I just want to highlight that the county government has prioritized the support for the Village of Buchanan, the town of Cortland, and for the school district of Henrik Hudson. All four of our jurisdictions, the county and those three, benefited from the payment of those taxes that were struck originally with Entergy. But given the fact that the resources of Buchanan are severely affected by this, Hen Hut School District is severely affected by this change, and Cortland more so than the county is very supportive of these grants to help the village, to help the town, to help the school district. So no complete intergovernmental support for what's happening to benefit those jurisdictions, and we thank you for a job well done.
Thank you, County Executive. Other questions or comments?
Hi, this is Victoria from Riverkeeper. Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Awesome. Yeah, we just wanted to echo everyone's thanks for this decision to support a diverse set of projects, communities, and individuals via the Indian Point Community and Environmental Fund. We're especially excited to see funding continue for the Hudson River Biological Monitoring Program, which was funded by decades by power plants to measure their destructive impact on the Hudson River ecosystem. So we think this is really great, and thank you so much.
You know, thank you, Victoria. And I think that it will be actually really fascinating to see the results from the research. You know, you've got decades of data showing, you know, population on fish species when the plants along the Hudson, not just Indian Point, but others were operating with once through cooling. And so it will be fascinating to see the results of this monitoring program going forward, and to kind of document, you know, the changes in the fish populations on the river. So we agree, and I know Kelly Turturro maybe on could also speak to the importance of the data for DEC permitting decisions on the Hudson River.
Thank you, Tom. We were really pleased to be able to work with the Hudson River Foundation and Riverkeeper and a variety of organizations who allowed their scientists to work together in partnership with DEC, Riverkeeper, and the Hudson River Foundation to come up with a plan to continue this monitoring that has occurred for many years in the Hudson River from funding that we received from power plants. And with Entergy as the last power plant that was funding this program, it was critical to have this funding to continue that effort. So thank you to everybody who was involved in this effort.
Thank you, Kelly.
And lastly, Tom, if I could thank everyone, not only for your work and the governor's support for this grant, but this is certainly responsive and relevant to the concerns we've been hearing over the last number of months from families and community members to make sure our schools are safe during this unique time of decommissioning. And that on behalf of the school district, we never felt alone and we never felt uninformed throughout this whole process. So thank you for making sure we had a seat at the table and this team's commitment to this grant, but also the Cessation Fund. Folks have walked the talk that you have not forgotten about this area and you haven't forgot about the impacted areas, especially our school community and 2,300 students. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I see Sandy Galiff may have a hand up.
I do. I just wanted to follow up with, what Joe has just said with the Hudson School District. Are there any particulars about how this is going to work? And you said it's during the whole decommissioning period of time. Are there any particulars on this, like where the, because I've gotten a lot of emails on this topic, so I think it's great. And I think the public has really been very inspirational at getting this grant. I give them so much credit. So. Are there particulars, or is that coming out on the school safety?
Yeah, I think we're going to ask Dave Lockbaum to present a number of slides from the school working group. We did a lot of work over the summer. We published our findings and initial work product in September 3rd, and he'll walk through those slides. And I think this is meant to provide a resource for future work. Based on the ongoing work of the school working group. So we'll hear from Dave and we'll probably have some time for questions and thoughts about how we might be applying this 500,000.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Seeing no additional comments or questions, just thank everyone again for all of their work to get to this point. And thank you very much to Governor Hochul's office, to the governor, to Raj Shah, who got up to speed on all of this very quickly and was able to process these awards. So thank you so much, Raj, and pass our thanks on to the governor. With that, Tom, can you go to the next slide, please? So now we're going to turn to Decommissioning Oversight Board business. Next slide, please. At our first meeting, Sandy Galiff made a very good recommendation, which was to make sure that everyone on the Decommissioning Oversight Board was free of any conflict of interest, such as some kind of financial interest in Holtec, for example, and recommended that we actually sign a certification to that end. And so we did circulate such a certificate to all the members. If you haven't already done so, please send that back in to Tom Kazmarek or to John Sipos, and we'll keep the records there. As we have already noted in this meeting, we do have a court reporter. She's developing a transcript for us. The transcript of the last meeting is available on our website, and the transcript for this meeting will be posted as soon as it's ready. And we also post the actual video of the meetings as well. That's all in lieu of minutes. Next slide, please. As I alluded to when I was going over the agenda, we're aware that there is work happening on the Enbridge pipeline in the community. I think that there were some community questions about the pipeline work just on Monday and Tuesday of this week. And so yesterday I asked Enbridge if they would be able to present a very brief update to us to inform not only the Decommissioning Oversight Board, but the public at large, exactly what they're doing on that pipe. You know, I think it's important that Enbridge engage with the community on a regular basis when there's work being done in the community to avoid any confusion or concerns, or to make sure that obviously they have regulatory requirements to inform the regulator when there's work going on. My understanding is that this is work that was actually presented by PHMSA at our June meeting to let us know that this would be happening. But I'm going to be turning it over to Enbridge and let them have a few minutes to explain the work on the line. So do we have Bill Quinn?
Good afternoon, Tom. This is John Sheridan.
Oh, hi, John. Yep.
Government Relations for Enbridge and Algonquin Gas. With me today is Bill Quinn. He oversees pipeline integrity for the company. And as you indicated, would like to provide an update on the maintenance work. Thank you for the invitation. And I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the intro, and to the team, appreciate the opportunity to go over a brief pipeline integrity overview. And so in this location around Indian Point, we have the Algonquin 26-inch pipeline, and it's a carbon steel transmission line transporting natural gas. And as part of our ongoing pipeline integrity program, we conducted an inline tool inspection, which is normal. We do this all over our entire system in North America. And these tools record features or indications on the pipeline. And at this location at Broadway Road, there were no actionable features. So what that means is there was nothing requiring us or mandating us to excavate and inspect the pipeline. However, as part of our enhanced analysis integrity program, we did identify 3 features of interest. So again, these are above and beyond any code requirements, and went ahead and developed a plan to excavate and inspect these indications. And as most people know, the pipeline crosses Broadway Road at this location, and it does that going through a steel casing. So from a construction standpoint, it just makes sense to excavate right across the road and replace that section of pipe with new pipe. So that's what's occurring here. So members of the public have probably noticed excavations in the area on either side of the road, which is normal, and then excavation will proceed across the road. And jersey barriers and other fencing is put up to protect the public and the excavation. And I guess additional background and information on this site, the pipeline was reduced to 0 pressure on October 19th in anticipation of this work, which again is normal when we do a pipe replacement. So there's about 94 feet of pipe that will be replaced across this road, and that's actually due to start tomorrow. And the final welding will be complete Friday. And then the overall completion date for the project is estimated at November 12th. That's when everything would be backfilled and in normal service, the road and all that sort of thing. So Tom, is a quick overview, and happy to turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Bill. I want to point out also that the DPS, which has the delegated oversight authority from PHMSA, the federal pipeline regulator, to monitor this activity, and our staff is aware of the work. And our staff will be in the field at any time that there is active construction on the pipe, and monitoring that activity. Kevin Speicher is on the line, and our gas safety team is on the line. So I want to make sure they don't have any questions for you pertaining to the construction or any comments about the DPS oversight. Kevin? I might be putting Kevin on the spot, and he had some technical difficulties when he signed on. Arpit, you want to just confirm you guys have staff in the field? I can confirm they have staff in the field. I'm not sure they have the mics. Arpit, are you available?
Yeah. Sorry, Kevin was having some audio issues, but we don't have any questions for Bill at the moment.
Okay. And you can confirm DPS has staff in the field for the construction activity?
Yes, I can confirm that we will have staff in the field for the construction activities.
Thank you. I know, Bill, you guys have a hard stop, but I want to make sure the Decommissioning Oversight Board members get an opportunity if anyone has any questions pertaining to construction activity in this brief.
Tom?
Yes,
Peter
Senator.
Harcum here. Very quick question. Thank you for the overview. First we want to reassure folks that the overall issue of the pipeline is something that's front and center to the task force. We're going to continue to take very seriously. But I want to thank you for arranging this presentation. And the question I have is, what safety protocols and precautions are being taken to protect the community and residents while this work is going on? Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the question. So are you asking specifically on the construction piece or the overall integrity?
No, I would say just the construction piece, because as I prefaced, the overall pipeline issue is a much larger issue for this task force. But right now, I think we're just focused on the work. And I know our office and Assemblywoman Gala, we receive photos and emails of concern from constituents. So just really per this this work that you're doing, what safety precautions are being taken?
Yeah, for sure, Pete. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll start off with a few points, and I know John has a few comments on that as well. But as I mentioned, to protect the excavation area for the public safety, the Jersey barriers are installed, and then also steel road plates are installed where the excavation goes across the road. That's a common construction practice. In the last 30 minutes, we heard a lot of common comments and discussion on infrastructure improvement in Cortland and Buchanan on the sewer systems and municipal authority. The same thing would happen there. Anytime you dig across a road for a water line or a sewer line, it's very common to put road plates there to protect that excavation. And then I believe additionally there's a police detail when construction activities are occurring. And John, pull you into the conversation if there's anything I may have missed.
Just that the safety measures, the Jersey barriers, the fencing, the cones, that's all done in compliance with New York DOT regulations.
What about the pipeline itself? Is it depressurized as you work in that area?
It is, yes. It was reduced to zero pressure on October 19th. So there's no pressure in the pipeline right now. And then actually there's other techniques we employ to remove any residual gas fumes from the pipeline in order to cut the pipeline and then weld a new piece in. So zero pressure.
Mm-hmm. Hi, this is Teresa. I just want to make a comment also. I know Enbridge had contacted myself, our administrator, and also our engineer. And before the construction, they came in, explained what was happening. Our engineer was comfortable with what was happening, and they reviewed what work that they were going to be doing. And I also know that our engineer is out in the field doing observations of the construction of the pipeline, of the maintenance of the pipeline.
Can I just comment, Sandy Galiff?
Yes, please.
I think the problem is, we have a lot of anxiety around Indian Point, many different aspects of it all. And is there a way that when Enbridge is doing any kind of work besides, letting the local officials know, that they can really let the public know, either with a news release? I mean, we got a news release that there was going to be a siren going off today at a certain point. So you're aware of it and you're not nervous about it. Or, to have a website that people can go on that, is the Enbridge website, that anybody can go there if they have a question right away. I think your communications need to be better. I believe that's what I'm trying to say with the public.
Thank you, Assemblyman Galiff, and we will certainly take that back and see what we can do to improve communications. Absolutely, and we will let you know what the end result is. But thank you for highlighting that, and happy to try to improve that from where we are now. Thank you.
If I could just add to that, to what Sandy has said, this is Catherine Borgia from the County Board. I think some of the anxiety from the surrounding neighbors is also that the understanding what you've said to us today about the protocols, but that it seems like the place that oftentimes it was not being guarded or monitored, and that there's a level of anxiety around that. So I think that more communication is good, but also just maybe more physical presence would be useful too.
This is John Sheridan. Thank you for that comment. We'll bring it back. I mean, we do have a police detail during the day. The trench is plated at night with Jersey barriers and other safety measures. But we will certainly look at that and see if that's something that we can advance as far as having more personnel out there. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, John and Bill, thank you for coming with short notice. We're, as you heard, there's the larger overall issues associated with the co-location of the pipe in the Indian Point during decommissioning. I know that members of the community are going to continue to have questions for us pertaining to that, and we as the regulator are going to continue to do what we need to ensure public safety, and this will surely be a topic for further discussion at future meetings. But we really appreciate the communication today, given the timely nature of the construction activity that's underway.
Tom, this is Linda.
Yes, Linda?
Yeah, this is such a critical subject that we have been discussing for several years now. I just want to follow up with all my colleagues, what they've been saying. Using the sirens as an example, prototype, we all get notifications, the sirens are going to go on today. And then right afterwards, after the siren testing is completed, then we get an update on the results. So that is something I think we need. We need it to be immediate. I like Sandy's idea about a website that the public, that we all can go and check all the time on the activity that is being done there by Enbridge and their contractors. I think that will be, very forthright. Transparency is a working word that I think will answer some of the community's, the citizens' questions. I also would like to have us get the monitors that are there, if we could get reports and updates from them sooner rather than later. We're all really concerned. We've raised issues I have about the pipeline's close proximity to schools. in particular, the Buchanan Verplank Elementary School. So we're all, concerned about it, and the transparency information would be invaluable for us to be able to disseminate it, but also for the citizens and families to be able to go up on the website and see it for themselves. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Supervisor. I'm going to let John and Bill go. I appreciate you guys being on. We have more to come, and we're also obviously interested in the PHMSA assessment of the pipelines. And as I said, there's certainly going to be a continued discussion around the pipeline issues, but we appreciate, John, Bill, you giving us an update on the activity that's occurring right now. But I know you guys have another meeting to get to, and if you need to hop off, you can feel free. But we're going to move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over now to John Sipos, who's going to walk us through some of the DPS oversight activities. This is just a reminder that we did create an Indian Point tip line to the extent that there are employees or others with knowledge of any issues of concern that they want to make us aware of. There's an opportunity to do so through this email address, ip.tips@dps.ny.gov, and at a phone number 518-486-1487. We also have a web form online. With that, next slide. I'm going to turn it over to John Sipos, our counsel at DPS and counsel to the Task Force and Decommissioning Oversight Board. John?
Thank you, Tom. And for those folks who are just listening by phone and were unable to see that number, it is 518-486-1487. And feel free to jot that down and keep it for should the need arise. So I'd like to talk with folks tonight about DPS activities, DPS oversight activities at the site since our last meeting. In June, DPS staff provided a guidance document to Holtec pertaining to emergency notification protocols and pipeline safety notification obligations. Again, that went out in June. Holtec has acknowledged that guidance and is complying with it. Also, DPS staff, as you heard earlier, has been at the Indian Point site. The gas safety staff has been there and has been there a number of times since June. Third point, just to touch on briefly, Holtec has been providing DPS with daily summaries of weather information, effluent safety data, and the spent fuel pool temperature data, something we take into account and look at very carefully. And there has been, to date, no safety concerns in those areas. If we could go to the next slide concerning project and financial reporting. Thank you. As folks know from the joint proposal and the Public Service Commission order from May 19, there are monthly project meetings with state agency representatives as well as local and county representatives. There is that opportunity. Those meetings have occurred each month. They have been informative, and Holtec has been providing the information that is required and been responsive to state agency representative questions. Also, in August 2021, so this would be after the end of the first half of the year, Holtec executives met with state regulators to discuss the status of the decommissioning trusts, the 3 trusts that exist at the Indian Point site. And Holtec has also reported that the project thus far, this is the decommissioning project, is on schedule and from a cumulative perspective under budget, and that is through September. And so lastly, Holtec is in compliance with the minimum trust fund balance obligations that were set out in the joint proposal and in the Commission's May 19 order. So if we could go to the next slide, there's another bit of information that DPS would like to share with folks, and that concerns the movement of spent fuel assemblies out of the spent fuel pools to dry cask storage. As folks may remember, under the January 2017 order, under the January 2017 agreement, Entergy agreed that 24 casks would be loaded by the end of 2021. It appears that we are on track to meet that obligation from that contract provision. Holtec has assumed that obligation and has moved 2 casks already and is prepared to move 2 more casks by the end of the calendar year, which will bring the facility up to where it's supposed to be. And this is, I would just add, this is a very important function. It's a very important task. It's one of the prerequisites to move on with decommissioning. And with each cask movement from the spent fuel pools out to the dry cask storage, there is a reduction of risk. An important concept to keep in mind. That's what I have for DPS reporting. I think, Tom, we're going to go over to DEC now. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Kelly Turturro, are you presenting for DEC?
I am. Thank you, Tom.
Great.
So I'm just going to take a step back to provide some background to May of 2021. On May 28th, 2021, DEC and Holtec entered into an administrative order on consent. As a high-level overview, the order requires 3 things. So first of all, Holtec must investigate and remediate non-radiological contamination and remediate any radiological contamination necessary to meet New York State standard of 10 millirems. In addition, Holtec is required to pay New York State Department of Environmental Conservation as well as New York State Department of Health oversight costs in an annual amount not to exceed $300,000 for 10 years. And then finally, Holtec was required to post a financial assurance in the amount of $140 million. That financial assurance has been posted by Holtec and remains in place currently. So Tom, if you would go to the next slide, please. In terms of next steps, I wanted to also share what we've been working on and what we've received from Holtec. So first of all, in accordance with the terms of the order, Holtec has submitted to DEC a citizen participation plan. That plan is currently under review by DEC staff. And this is a plan that will ensure public involvement in the review of all work plans and remedial action plans going forward that will govern the remediation of the site. As I mentioned, DEC staff is currently reviewing the citizen participation plan, and we will make that available to the public once it is finalized. Secondly, earlier this week, Holtec submitted a remedial investigation scoping work plan to DEC for review. This work plan will outline the overall program of remedial investigation at the site. We have just received the work plan earlier this week. It is currently under review by our DEC team. And once we've completed that review, we will make the draft work plan available for public review. So finally, just one other note that I wanted to share with everybody is DEC will be working on an online public repository for all these documents associated with the order. Once that is set up, we will advise the public of the location, and the public will be able to obtain copies and or review all of these documents that are associated with the order on consent. Thank you. Tom, back to you.
Thank you very much. Kelly, can you go to the next slide, please?
Could, Tom, could I just ask Kelly to talk briefly about, you know, I for some reason had missed out on this public participation. What are your guidelines or goals, or we just don't know anything at this point?
So, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I'm sorry, with the citizens, how, I mean, how are you going to, I mean, how does this work?
Yep, this citizen participation plan really governs the ability for the public to look at all the documents that are coming into us, all these work plans, whether it be remedial investigation or remediation of the site. Before those documents are finalized, there will be an opportunity for public review. So the citizen participation plan is the document that lays that out and lays out the schedule for the documents coming into DEC, DEC's review, and then the documents being made available for public review and comment.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Kelly? Thank you very much. Now, Tom, are we going to Jennifer Waka, please?
Thank you, Tom. So this list is the emergency management aspects of the joint proposal. The New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services continues emergency preparedness coordination with Holtec and state and county partners. The ongoing activities for this include daily summaries from Holtec, monthly meetings, testing of emergency communication, data sharing, and alerting systems, and in-person visit by State Office of Fire Prevention and Control. Holtec has met all of these obligations to date. Thank you. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions for Jennifer? Okay, we're going to move now to provide an overview of some things that the working group has been doing. As you all recall, at the June meeting, the Decommissioning Oversight Board requested that we form a working group to discuss concerns that were being raised within the school community. And we've started that work. Next slide, please. I want to turn it over now to Dave Lockbaum, who is the Decommissioning Oversight Board's technical expert and advisor. Dave has participated in all of the working group meetings and has done a lot of research to assist us. He's going to present the work of the working group. So I'll turn it over to Dave. Dave?
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon. I'm pleased to cover the working group's efforts about radiation monitoring at the elementary school. The presentation will identify the members of the working group, outline the scope of concerns addressed by the group, provide background on the school and oversight by federal and state entities, describe the group's assessment of potential pathways for radioactive releases and measures that manage that associated risk, communicate the group's recommendations, solicit feedback, and finish with any follow-up items. The working group met several times since the last DOB meeting on June 23rd. As illustrated by this slide, the group benefited from the insight provided by nearly 24 local and state officials. It truly was a team effort. Next slide, please. The working group examined the management and releases of radiological and non-radiological materials during decommissioning, as well as the traffic of heavy machinery on site and trucks passing by the school. Next slide, please. Some background on the school. The Buchanan Burbank Elementary School has 349 students from kindergarten through 5th grade. The school is less than a mile from areas at Indian Point that contain radioactive materials. The dry cask storage area, it's shared by all units, the Unit 2 spent fuel pool and the Unit 3 spent fuel pool. Next slide, please. This satellite view shows the Unit 2 spent fuel pool, or SFP, the Unit 3 pool to the north, and the dry cask storage area at the top end of the slide. The natural gas pipelines we've talked about aren't shown on this picture, but they're located to the south of the Unit 3 spent fuel pool, furthest away from the dry storage area. Next slide, please. And I'll turn to oversight by state and federal agencies. The Atomic Energy Act gives the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC, federal oversight over nuclear reactor safety issues. New York State's Department of Public Service Commission, Department of Environmental Conservation, and Department of Health have jurisdiction over radiological and non-radiological aspects of activities at Indian Point. Next slide, please. The NRC licensed the reactors at Indian Point to operate. Although permanently shut down, the licenses are not terminated until decommissioning activities are completed. For example, the requirements governing the release of radioactive materials to the air and water remain the same until license termination, as they have been during reactor operation over the past several decades. OSHA complements the NRC's efforts by overseeing non-radiological worker safety issues like confined space entry and falling hazards. Next slide, please. Moving on to assessments by the working group. First, consider potential pathways for radiation or radioactive materials being released during decommissioning. Next slide, please. This is a, whoops, back up a slide, please, Tom. This graphic shows a map of Indian Point site with the Hudson River located at the bottom. Detectors are installed on all vents from buildings containing radioactive materials to monitor exhaust flows and alarm on high radiation levels. The three circles in the upper half of the graphic represent the Unit 2, Unit 1, and Unit 3 reactor containments left to right. Above each circle is a rectangle representing the fuel handling building for each unit, which housed the spent fuel pools. Next slide, please. Moving on to the working group's assessment of the radiation risk during decommissioning. Next slide, please. The radiological release hazard depends primarily on two factors: the amount of radioactive materials that are present and the energy available to propel those radioactive materials to places they shouldn't be. In decreasing order, the hazards are the operating reactor core, a spent fuel pool, a dry spent fuel storage canister, and material liberated during decommissioning or dismantling. Next slide, please. Millions of curies of radioactivity were released from the 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl accident during the 2 weeks it took for those two reactor cores to achieve some level of stability. A dry cask drop or demolition accident would be a puff release by comparison, without the energy behind it to sustain a release over a protracted period of time. A puff release would last minutes or hours at most, as compared to weeks. Next slide, please. That difference between what could happen when a reactor operates and what can happen during decommissioning is reflected by the difference in liability insurance that's required when a reactor operates and when it's shut down. Each operating plant must carry at least $450 million of liability insurance against offsite damages, where it's only required to carry $100 million during decommissioning. Next slide, please. The decommissioning risk is clearly reduced, but not eliminated. Despite the reduced risk, the federal requirements governing radiological protection for workers and the public remain the same during decommissioning as they did when the reactors were operating. In other words, the protection standards are not lessened lockstep with as the hazard declines. Instead, margins to those sustained standards increase over time. Next slide, please. Fuel bundles are being transferred from spent fuel pools into dry casks within the fuel handling buildings. If a fuel bundle were to be dropped or a cask dropped and radiation released from that event, A monitor in the vent from the fuel handling building would detect any increased radiation and allow the exhaust flow to be stopped. Despite the lower risk, the release is still being managed. Next slide, please. Loaded dry casks are transported very slowly from the fuel handling building to the dry storage pad. The casks are designed to remain intact even if they're dropped more than a dozen feet or if they're immersed in a burning pit of or puddle of diesel fuel. The working group became aware of several natural gas wells and pipelines installed within a half a mile of the dry cask storage facility at the Fort St. Vrain plant in Colorado during its decommissioning over the past 15 years. We also were aware of the measures that were taken to guard against that natural gas hazard. Next slide, please. An early step in the decommissioning process involves extensive surveys of buildings and grounds to classify the location and nature of radiological and non-radiological hazards. Those surveys then inform appropriate measures to properly dismantle the facility while managing and disposing of those materials. Federal radiation protection standards for workers and the public remain in place as they were during reactor operation to provide equivalent protections throughout the decommissioning process. Next slide, please. Radioactively contaminated trash must be disposed of at licensed facilities and transported per federal regulations. Accidents have happened in the past during transportation of this material that required local remediation efforts. Next slide, please. As John Sipos indicated, as more and more radioactivity contaminated debris is removed from the site and more radionuclides decay, the risk of a radiation release event becomes lower and lower. Next slide, please. Indian Point has a legacy issue involving the leakage of radioactively contaminated water into the ground. The leakage has been evaluated by state and federal representatives independent of the assessments conducted by the plant owner and its contractors. Next slide, please. The state and federal representatives conclude that the leakage does not impact drinking water or aquatic environments. Next slide, please. This contour map shows that the site resembles a bowl with a spout emptying into the Hudson River. The black diamonds indicate the many wells that were installed on the site to monitor the underground plume of tritium and contaminated water. Next slide, please. Now I'll cover some of the existing monitoring capabilities that exist on-site and off-site at Indian Point. Next slide, please. Federal regulations limit radiation exposures to the public to 100 millirem per year from all sources from the site. These regulations require monitoring at the on-site point of release as well as off-site monitoring to show compliance with these federal limits. And these regulations require the owner to submit annual reports to the Nrc on the radiation release to the air and water, including the results from the groundwater monitoring on site. These reports show that the radiation release from decommissioning plants overall are typically less than 4% of the radiation release from operating plants, which is in turn a fraction of the federal limit. Next slide, please. The federal regulations also limit radiation exposures to workers at the site, and owners must also submit annual reports to the Nrc on those worker exposures. These reports have shown that the workforce at decommissioning plants receive less radiation exposure than the workers at operating plants. The lesser worker exposures and lower radiation releases during decommissioning are evidence that the sustained protection standards increase margins to safety for both the workers and the public throughout decommissioning. Next slide, please. Circa 2004, Entergy installed a ring of 16 radiation monitors made by Reuter-Stokes around the site at distances ranging from 0.4 of a mile to just over 2 miles. Holtec is required to maintain these monitors until all spent fuel is transferred into dry storage. The monitors send readings to a computer, which also gets continuous inputs of wind direction and wind speed. Collectively, this system provides a good picture of what's happening where. Next slide, please. Two of the Reuters Oaks monitors are located near the school. They're shown on the diagram on the left as RS9 and RS8, with the school located to the left. The picture on the right shows one of the pole-mounted monitoring stations, in this case, monitoring station number 9. Next slide, please. This is a graphical representation of the results from those 16 radiation monitors. The readings are fairly low. They're in terms of millirem per hour, 0.0078, for example, at monitoring station number 9. Again, the federal limit on exposure to the public is 100 millirem per year. If somebody was standing at that pole 24 hours a day for 365 days, they would not get 100 millirem, they get 68.3 millirem. Not that I'd recommend anybody stand at that pole for that long, but would be in compliance with the regulation. Next slide, please.
Hey, Dave, sorry to interrupt the flow. This is Tom. Could you go back to that slide, please? This data showing the results of the real-time monitors, is this something that we could just have as a standing agenda item on a going forward basis for the Decommissioning Oversight Board? Basically, a review of the results of the real-time monitors between the meetings, you know, so just as an update, just like John Sipos reports on the financial, you know, decommissioning trust fund, you know, we can report on the results of the real-time monitors.
Yeah, one of the things, since we're on this slide, went back to it, the 16 monitors give you a better picture than any one indication by itself. Here, they're all roughly the same, which suggests that they're not, the source of that radiation is not Indian Point because the wind doesn't blow in all directions at the same time. So 16 data points gives you a much better insight than any one data point by itself.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, would you call those data basically background levels?
That's basically what you're seeing. You're seeing what the background is for that region.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Holtec bought the Indian Point site from Entergy and now owns the regulatory requirement to protect workers and the public from radiation exposures and to provide the annual reports on worker exposures and radiological releases. The indication at the bottom shows a link to where those where those reports are posted on the NRC website. The NRC maintains a web page for all the reports for each plant. This is the link to the Indian Point 2 plant reports. Next slide, please. The Department of Health, New York State Department of Health, independently monitors radiological conditions around Indian Point using air and water sampling at weekly, monthly, and quarterly intervals. The link at the bottom provides where those reports can be seen and downloaded. Next slide, please. This satellite image again shows the location of the Department of Health's air monitor in the lower left corner. The layers of on-site point of release monitors, off-site continuous monitors, owner and state surveys lessens the likelihood that a large radiation release harms the public. Next slide, please. The working group also looked for radiation monitoring lessons from other sites and other facilities to benchmark against what could be done around Indian Point. Next slide, please. For example, C10 is a local nonprofit group near the operating Seabrook nuclear plant in New Hampshire. C10 manages a ring of 17 monitoring stations comparable to the Reuters system around Indian Point. C10 experienced one monitoring station suddenly indicating a large increase in radiation levels. The wind was blowing towards Seabrook from that monitoring station. Therefore, both that monitoring station and Seabrook were downwind of wherever the source of that radiation was. It wasn't coming from Seabrook to that station. That's why having a network rather than one data point helps distinguish what's happening from what's not. Next slide, please. Brookhaven out on Long Island also uses worker and on-site radiation monitoring to understand what's going on. Next slide, please. Just as motorists use speedometers and law enforcement officers use radar guns to verify compliance with posted speed limits, Plant owners, state and federal officials use radiation monitors to verify compliance with radiation exposure limits. And just as traffic tickets discourage non-compliances, the NRC has sanctions readily available if needed to discourage non-compliances on releases. I went through and looked at the NRC's website and identified at least 15 sanctions for violations during decommissioning, including one previous event at Indian Point. The NRC and the state are watching. Next slide, please. With this speedy overview of the route taken by the working group, let's move to the recommendations the group made from this homework. Next slide, please. Basically, we saw it as two phases. Until all spent fuel is transferred into dry storage, the working group recommends that the existing continuous Reuters-Stokes monitors be used to provide periodic reports to the school superintendent. Afterwards, the working group recommends revisiting the issue. Due to radioactive decay of radionuclides with shorter half-lives, the Reuters-Stokes monitors would become less useful. It might be possible to use more frequent reporting from off-site monitoring stations or to install continuous monitors of a more suitable type. Next slide, please. The working group, did we skip a slide? The working group doesn't consider this to be a one and done proposition. Our recommendations seek to address the concerns and meet the needs of the DOP and the community. If there's a better or different way of doing that, we'd like to hear it. Thanks for your patience during this long presentation. And as monitoring needs are evaluated in the future, it's good to hear from previous discussions by Tom and others that funding is available for that purpose. Last slide, please. We recognize that the DOB has many items on its plate, and the group appreciates this opportunity to provide our input for future decision making, and will provide additional assistance when needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. And thank you for volunteering to walk through all of those slides, and for all the work you do to support the Decommissioning Oversight Board. We are really lucky to have you on the team. I want to open it up for questions for Dave.
Tom, it's Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Yeah, this was comprehensive. This was helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
A couple quick questions. The New York State Department of Health also monitors, you said. How frequent is that? And will that continue also?
There's weekly and monthly monitoring, as well as continuous monitoring at one station. My understanding is that will continue, but I defer to somebody else to confirm whether that assumption is correct or not.
Mm-hmm. And what was my other question? I forget. Okay. I'm a fan of these monitoring continuing into perpetuity, you know, even when all the dry cask storage units are filled. So I think that is something that should be strongly considered, you know. And the monitoring is air and land, air and the groundwater, or just the air quality?
Right now, and continuing into the future until the license is terminated, the NRC requires air monitoring, ground monitoring. There's also some aquatic or plant life that's sampled to get a picture of what pathways for radiation to get into the public. So the NRC requires all those to be monitored until the license is terminated, even after the fuel is onto the pad.
And I just wanted the public to hear that, because that's very critical. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, it's Teresa. And just to piggyback on what Linda said, you know, the monitoring is in place there already. So I don't see it being a problem to continue it for indefinitely, or, you know, I know the spent fuel will eventually be in the cask, but as a comfort level to the, you know, the people in the community. Also, I would like to also ask for the report to also go to the Village of Buchanan. I know you had mentioned to the superintendent, but the school is within the Village of Buchanan. So if that could also, the information be forwarded to us. And one of the things I think for people who are not local, that need to understand, because I've seen comments along the way. When the actual decommissioning does begin and there are trucks and equipment, what I want the school community to understand is there will be no trucks. There will be no truck traffic in front of the school on Westchester Avenue. That is a residential area, and there's no reason for the trucks to be there. So the school, the back of the school, and there's a wooded area, and then we get to Broadway. So that's where any truck traffic or anything that's happening through the decommissioning process, that will be the route that the trucks will come in off of Louisa Street and come through Broadway. They will not be coming through the Village of Buchanan, and it will not be coming on. So I want to alleviate that concern with people that the trucks will not be in front of the school anywhere near the children with traffic. So I don't think that's come out before. So I think that's important for some of the non-local people to understand that.
Thank you, Mayor. And I believe that when Holtec presents after this, they're going to discuss briefly the truck routes as well. So I appreciate the point, though.
So Tom, just as a follow-up from an earlier question I had, how is the 500,000 from the community funds being used? It looks like we already have radiological and air testing. So is there something else that we're going to be doing with that $500,000?
Yeah, so there is existing monitors, but as Dave mentioned, those monitors right now are scheduled to come out of service. Well, Dave, why don't you communicate the issue? You'll do it better than I will. What we envision kind of over the next few years may be some needed where we may need some resources. I'll let you speak to that.
Sure. For example, the Reuters-Stokes monitors are primary intention is to detect a reactor accident. And the primary element of a plume from a reactor accident is iodine 131, which has about an 8 or 9 day half-life. For any point 2, 3, and 1, all of the radioactive iodine is decayed away. It's gone. So if there was a release from a spent fuel cask or a dropped fuel bundle, there are other elements with longer half-lives that will be released. But as time passes, even some of those decay away. As a result, the Reuters-Stokes monitors become less and less able to detect radiation. There are other monitors that can do that. And the decision in phase 2 is to look at, can those be redeployed or retasked, or will new monitors need to be installed to take over the job? So that's what phase 2 will try to answer and get to continuing to monitoring with things that actually do that purpose rather than just occupy space.
Okay.
And so the other thing that I'll mention is that there will be more discussions with the parents in the community through PTO meetings and maybe through future meetings of the Decommissioning Oversight Board, where we can better understand specific concerns, turn around another report like this to research those concerns. And it may be that there are future needs that we're not thinking of in this report, but that could come up through future discussions with the school community and with the school district themselves. So this is an ongoing process. I think we have time because the spent fuel is still being transferred to dry cask, and that's going to take some additional time before decommissioning really gets underway in earnest. And we have the existing monitoring system in place. And so I think that through the and what DEC talked about with the community involvement plan, I think there will be additional needs that may come up that we could potentially tap into that 500,000 to help solve. And I don't know, Joe Hochreiter, if you wanted to add anything at this point on the 500,000.
Yeah, besides thanking everyone for thinking of us, this certainly has been a conversation for a number of months of what additional mitigation layers exist that make sense for the school district. while Buchanan Verplank is certainly well within a mile facility, we have other schools that are another 2 miles away. So this is about added layers of protection and precaution, setting up systems of communication so that the real-time monitor shared with the public to make sure they understand what is happening in the, perhaps other mitigation layers that haven't come across our plate yet in terms of what other school districts are doing or best practices. But it certainly is a good start. We have additional resources to make this happen would be necessary, and for the most part, we have that budgeted now. And it's about doing some sensible research to see what makes sense for us.
Thank you. Any other questions on the presentation? Again, Dave, thank you so much. There will be more to do while we continue to stay engaged with the school community and the community at large, and really appreciate the effort on this.
Very welcome.
Next slide. Tom, next slide, please.
Yes, just switching over. We're moving over to a presentation by Holtec, so just changing the slide deck here.
Thank you very much. Terrific. And who will be presenting for Holtec?
It's good evening. I'm Richard Barone. I am the Senior Vice President here at Indian Point, and I'd like to thank the Oversight Board for giving us this opportunity to provide an update on the decommissioning activities that we've performed so far at Indian Point. Also joining me tonight are Joe Delmar. He's our Senior Director of Government Affairs and Communications. Pat O'Brien is our Senior Management of Government Affairs and Communications, and Jason Day, who is our General Counsel. Next slide, please. This is our waterfall chart, right? We go over this on a monthly basis. It basically captures our critical path activities, what's needed to drive us to site restoration. To date, we are on or in some cases ahead of schedule, and the details will follow in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. This is the agenda we set up. We'll go over site status, regulatory assurance, our fuel transfer campaign that's going on right now, our asphyxia pad installation that's proceeding. We'll talk about reactive vessel segmentation, site characterization, switch yard separation, our radioactive waste disposal that's in progress, some system structures and component abandonments that we're performing at this point in time. Gas line status, we'll talk about radiation monitoring systems and our labor update. This agenda is basically, it's based on what we discuss on a monthly basis, in addition to some topics that other folks wanted to discuss. I think the info provided will complement the previous slides that were presented tonight. Next slide, please. So we'll talk about site status. Next slide. So as you know, Unit 2 and Unit 3, both reactors are defueled. All fuel is currently located in their respective spent fuel pools or on the existing asphyxia pad. Asphyxia, again, is the independent spent fuel storage installation pad. The plant risk profile for both units is green relative to electric power availability, spent fuel pool cooling, and the spent fuel pool building closure. Spent fuel temperatures and levels at both units are within normal specifications. All primary cooling equipment is available and working satisfactorily, and we maintain margin. So what that means is we only need one service water pump to cool the spent fuel pools in each unit. Each unit has 6 service water pumps. We maintain them all operational. So we have margin in service water along with other cooling activities for the spent fuel pools themselves. And then last but not least, the daily, weekly, monthly, and year-to-date actual accumulated dose is consistently below established goals that we have on site. Next slide. And by the way, if anybody has a question, please stop me and we can discuss it further. Next slide, please. From a regulatory position here, the license amendment request for the 32 mic multi-purpose canister storage system was approved by the NRC in June of this year. The multi-purpose canister is what contains the spent fuel assemblies. The license amendment request for the high lift crane is under NRC review. We're going to need that for the Unit 3 spent fuel pool to transfer fuel from the pool itself to the pad. The PSDAR, which was submitted in December of 2019, actually the NRC accepted its review at time of closure, and their completion date for review is June of 2022. The exemption request for the permanently defueled emergency plan that's scheduled to be submitted this quarter of 2021, and I'll go through the applicable NRC reviews. The NRC jurisdiction transferred from the reactor oversight process because we're no longer an operating unit to the Office of Nuclear Materials Safety and Safeguards. However, from the ROP, we still have the inspection people that come to the site. Recently, we've had Nrc Inspections on the asphyxia pad installation and fire protection and financial insurance inspections. Those happened within the last couple of weeks. Both of those assessments were satisfactory. In addition to the fire protection inspection, it was also observed by New York Representative Heather Roth. And then we have next week, we have an NRC security inspection that's slated to start November 1st. Next slide, please. We've talked about this already, the fall fuel campaign. Next slide, please. Part of the 2017 agreement between Entergy, New York State, and Riverkeeper was to transfer 24 casks to the asphyxia pad by the end of this year. At the time of sale, 20 casks were transferred, thus requiring 4 additional casks. 4 multi-purpose canisters and 4 high storms were delivered to the site in August and September timeframe. So as of today, we do have 2 casks transferred to the asphyxia pad. The 3rd will be transferred on Friday. The 4th will be transferred by November 8th. So in total for this campaign, we've transferred 132 fuel assemblies to the asphyxia pad. So I just want to point out some of the pictures. What you see, the green canister is actually the multi-purpose canister. The green is just a plastic coating that was used to protect the canister during transport. And then the lower picture is the actual high storm where the MPC will eventually reside on the asphyxia pad itself. Next slide, please. And this slide just shows our workers taking one of the fuel assemblies out of the Unit 2 spent fuel pool and loading it into the MPC in the spent fuel pool itself. Next slide, please. We'll talk about the asphyxia pad expansion right now. That's the next slide. So the existing pad will hold 75 high storm canisters. In total, we'll need 125 canisters to store all of the spent fuel pool from the 3 reactors on site. So a new pad is being constructed. It'll contain 50 of the canisters. Like I said, the existing pad will hold 75. The new pad is being constructed adjacent to or east of the existing pad. I mean, at the end of the day, the 2 pads will make up the protected area for the site. And then prior to the new pad build, we had to install a stormwater retention pond that was required to be built, and this is complete. So you can see with the pictures of the excavation that's going on, we're just about complete with the excavation. We're working on some of the wall construction that'll be needed also. And then the concrete pour for the new pad is scheduled for the May timeframe in 2022. We'll need it approximately the July timeframe of 2022. Next slide, please. So reactive vessel segmentation is the other critical path activity that we're working on, right? So it's in addition to securing all the fuel, like I said, the other critical path is our reactive vessel segmentation. And that really entails dismantling the vessel, its internals, and any ancillary equipment previously used during plant operation. It's important to note any installation on these structures that contain asbestos that will be abated during the removal process, and same thing with any lead. Any lead paint found, we will abate or encapsulate it, again, prior to removal. The tooling to perform the segmentation activities, that's scheduled to arrive on site on January of 22, and our actual segmentation activities are scheduled to start in the July-August timeframe. Excuse me. So the existing containment building equipment hatch, that needs to be enlarged so we can accommodate removal of larger pieces of plant equipment. And we're going to use a rail system that'll go into containment and transport the larger pieces out. We'll start with the enlargement for Unit 3. That's in progress right now, as the picture shows, and then Unit 2 will follow. You can see the grid that we're cutting the containment walls with. We're going to use diamond impregnated wire that's used to cut into the containment wall, like I said. But it's important to note that that diamond wire uses a water system to cut, prevent. So, and what it does, it prevents dust and silica from going airborne. The other important piece to note is we keep a negative pressure on the containment building during these cutting evolutions. So what that means is air is always flowing in and no air is flowing out. And then entrance and egress of the equipment. And once we get the cut done, we'll be putting a roll-up door that'll close off the enlarged equipment hatch area. Next slide, please. Site characterization. We briefly talked about that also. The scope working plan was submitted to the New York State DEC on the 25th of this month, which was Monday. Final plan following review, we anticipate will come out first quarter of 22. I did make an error on stage 2. All right, some of these dates will go into late 22, early 2023. So after the final plan's approved, we'll develop remedial investigation work plans per parcel. And that's going to have a review cycle also. We'll have to submit work plans, and then that kind of pushes us out to the 2023 timeframe. Next slide, please. Next slide, switchyard separation. Important to note that all of our distribution buses are powered from 13.8 kV from the Buchanan switchyard. We are working diligently, we're trying to work diligently with Con Edison to transfer the ownership of breakers 1 and 3, which are the Unit 3 output breakers. We want to transfer ownership back to Con Edison. At the time of sale, when Entergy bought the unit from NYPA, breakers 1 and 3 came over with the sale. When Entergy purchased Unit 2 from Con Edison maintained ownership of breakers 7 and 9, which are the output breakers for Unit 2. So at the end of the day, we want to transfer back breakers 1 and 3 back to Edison for their control. We don't need to control the breakers anymore. In fact, any output, we call it air gap. We have air gapped any of our output sources to the ring bus. So we really have no need to maintain control of breakers 1 and 3. The 138 kV feeders that were the primary source of power to the station will be retired. And then only of the overhead lines on the towers that you see from Indian Point, they're completely de-energized. Next slide, please. So waste disposal. So any low-level waste disposal from IPEC, that's consistent with any waste disposal practices we perform when both units were operating. So our waste shipments with Holtec began in September. So we package waste from Unit 3 and Unit 2. That will continue, and when we go through the subsequent slides, we'll be able to show you some of the packaging techniques. We have a contract in place with Waste Control Specialists, WCS, out of Andrews, Texas. and they'll receive the waste from Indian Point. So rail and truck are both options for transportation. So I think, like the mayor said, the initial truck route out of Indian Point is north on Broadway, I guess east on Louisa Street, and then onto Route 9. So specific to local roads, no other route is used in Buchanan and or Cortland. And then the container fabrication for higher level classes of waste is under construction, and we would call that alpha waste or Bravo Charlie waste. And those will be needed to support reactive vessel segmentation, and they're specially designed containers. Next slide, please. So here's a series of pictures just to show what we're doing here. So if you go through the top horizontal row of pictures, the risers that we call the risers, those provided cooling to some of the components on top of the reactor head. All right, so you can see as we take them apart, we encapsulate them in either plastics, right? And we'll have to, if we have to do any cutting of that, that'll happen in containment. And then after we encapsulate those in plastics, those go into the waste shipment containers. They're pretty sturdy containers. We will take them out with the truck that you see on the right-hand side, and then we transfer by rail in Newton, Connecticut. It's the first for us. I think our first transfer to rail occurred about a week or so ago, right? And that's working out pretty well for us. And then the bottom horizontal row, again, shows a liquid waste processing skid for resin. Again, we transport those out. And then the headstand disassembly, what we used to, when we used to do refueling outages, the headstand, we would take the head off, and guys would work on the head itself. Well, that was constructed of steel and concrete, right? So the concrete remains for now, but the steel has all been disassembled, and you could see it's located in that storage container that's being lowered. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some system structures and component abandonment. There are 132 Unit 3 systems that we want to hold off and isolate. 90 of the 132 have been held off. All of the Unit 3 systems are held off. And these are systems we just no longer need just due to decommissioning activities. The abandonment priorities are based on areas needed for reuse and or closure. So what that means is we are reusing some of our administrative offices for projects that are going on. So we're cleaning those out just for reuse itself. Office areas with multiple buildings have been cleaned with most furniture removed. Top right-hand picture shows an office area that did contain asbestos tiles. And again, we removed those and we isolated those and abated those tiles in accordance with state requirements. The next slide, when we go to slide 24, we did take an outage trailer complex. We disassembled that, sent those up to the parking lot. And in fact, we were able to resell those to a vendor that needed the trailers themselves. And then an area control site cleanup is in progress, and we'll see that in slide 25. The bottom line of, well, before I get to the bottom line, we have done a lot of donation of good office furniture and ancillary office supplies to local government buildings, as well as local fire, police, and ambulance stations. I'm more than happy to do that. And then the next set of abandonments will be what you see on the bottom there. So there's a covered walkway no longer used. We'll take that down. There's an old Unit 3 access trailer that we're going to take down. And then a fab shop demolition that will start, that we'll take that down also. Our plan is to get all three of these structures down by the end of this year. Next slide. So what this shows is this trailer complex we used it was for our supplemental staff that came in during outages, Westinghouse, some valve people. It was good while it lasted, but we no longer need it. And so we took down this whole trailer complex That worked out pretty well for us. Next slide. And then it's called the ball field, but up on top, opposite our training building, we had a lot of excess equipment and storage trailers, and we're working on cleaning that stuff up right now. That's basically what we're showing here. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we have our critical path activities, right, which are the asphyxie pad, transferring fuel, and vessel segmentation. But at the same time, we want to clean up the site as we move along through the critical path activities. Next slide. So I know we've had a lot of discussion on the gas line. In addition to the work that they're doing outside of our gate, Enbridge did do a excavation on the 26-inch line inside our gate. I think there was 3 sections that they reviewed. There's a couple of insulation pieces that had to be repaired, and then the third piece, they put some reinforcement bands. So you can see they're pretty safety conscious. You see the carnival banners, and what that really was for them was for any elevated equipment they would have, not to interfere with any electrical lines that were in the area. When they did dig the hole, it was about at least 6 feet down, and that's the picture on the bottom left. And then after construction, and then after they were done, you could see on the bottom right-hand corner, they left the area just like they found it. So just a couple of things on the gas line for Indian Point proper. I just wanted to point out a couple of things, right? So during the transfer of fuel from either spent fuel pool to the asphyxie pad, we do not, and I'll emphasize, do not traverse across any of the gas lines on site. Secondly, we have what's called an Overlook Road. It's basically a load that allows us to come a road that comes down from Broadway, and we get to the GSB here, the Generation Support Building. So as in the past, if there are any heavy loads that we traverse across that gas line, steel plating will be laid down across the line. And this was common practice when both units were operating, and it'll be the same practice now as we do decommissioning. Right, so when we transferred steam generators and main power transformers in the past, we steel plated the line. Much like the steel plating the line in Broadway, we would do the same here. And then we do have a map. Let's go to the next slide. Kind of hard to see here, but the yellow line is the 42-inch line, and that's pretty much south of the plant. I don't see that interfering with, at the current time, no interference with any of the demolition activities. The 26 and 30-inch line, you could see go through the site proper, buried about, at least from my understanding, 6 feet down. We did some quick measurements today from containment, from the Unit 3 containment building. Hold on a minute, please. It's about 600 feet from the Unit 3 containment building. From the Unit 2 containment building is about 1,400 feet. That's the gas line that goes through, and that's the one they've been working on outside of our gate and internal to the plant. Next slide. We talked about radiation monitoring at length. I don't know if I have to do anything else here. But we do have the Reuters-Stokes, like we mentioned. One thing I will say is there are 16 of the Reuters-Stokes monitors. We replace 4 every quarter from a preventive maintenance / calibration perspective. All right, so that's done repeatedly with our guys here, just to make sure that we'll have continuous monitoring when needed. I know there was an issue with monitoring those detectors at the state level in Albany. I've been told today that that was repaired with our IT people, and I think we needed some runtime just to make sure that those repairs were good. If not, we'll go back and verify that if more corrective and maintenance is needed, we'll get that done also. So then I guess it's, you know, we talk about the Reuters-Stokes, but we do have thermolisent detectors outside of the plant, along with some air sampling units. So again, this is all consistent with what we had installed when the plant was operating versus now. We do have NRC observed E-plane drill that was performed in August with satisfactory results. Today we did have the siren test. I believe 2 of the sirens did not go off. 170 of 172 passed their tests. So the 2 that did not work, one was in Westchester, one is in Rockland. We'll get those repaired in short order. You know, that's all I have, but I want to offer the following. And I've talked this over with Joe and Pat. Anybody, and I mean anybody, who wants to take a tour of Indian Point, I will be personally more than happy to accommodate that request. Same thing with our manufacturing facility in Camden, where we manufacture the high storm and the casts that you see on the asphyxie pad. We will be more than happy to bring a group of people down to see how these casts are manufactured. I know there's a lot of questions on cracking that, you know, I'd like to see the data on that. We're not aware of any cracking. But we'd be more than happy to bring anybody on site, anybody down to Camden to see how we're decommissioning here on the site and the manufacture of the casks in Camden. That's all I have. Pending questions.
Tom, Linda?
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, Mr. Barone, thank you for the presentation. This gets to the heart of the questions from the community, and we as elected officials are here to ask the questions on their behalf. So please bear with me. NRC, do they have monitors on site as they did when the nuclear plants were in operation?
No, they do not have a full-time NRC inspector. However, they do have periodic inspections.
How frequent is that? How frequent?
It's all in accordance with their inspection procedures. We just had people here a week ago. Before that, 2 weeks ago. Next week, they'll be here doing a security inspection. And then they'll be back in December to do a follow-up from the inspections they did previously. We have a schedule, Linda, that I can show you, and I could show the team here. But we do have an inspection schedule from the NRC.
Do you have a schedule of when the monitors are going to be there?
Of when the NRC inspectors will be here? That's
the NRC?
correct. That's
but I mean, I would like the NRC just to show up on your doorstep, to be honest with you.
They have.
And,
They have the right to do that, and they do that.
yeah, I will speak to the NRC about that. I really think that that's important. They're the checks and balances for us. We're the lay people. And we need them to be checks and balances. This is such a critical issue for our community. You had the one slide that talked about the traversing over gas lines. Could you go back to that, Tom K? It was 2. Is that the one? I think it goes back one more.
No, that's it. That's the gas line.
Is that it? Okay. Well, my point being in, in the one paragraph, note the following: we do not traverse across any of the gas lines on site, period. Okay. Next, the next paragraph says, as if heavy loads are to be traversed across any gas line on site, then you'll put down steel platings. So is it you're not going to traverse across gas lines? Or if you do so, then you're going to put down the steel plating that we see out on our roads when Con Ed is digging up our roadways, by the way. I throw that in.
It's probably me. I wasn't clear enough there. But when we transfer fuel from the spent fuel pools, right, from Unit 2 and or Unit 3 to the asphyxie pad, right, we do not traverse across any of the gas lines. That's one. Secondly, we do traverse across the gas line. It's called Overlook Road. I'm sure you've gone over it when you've come to visit, right?
Yes,
And
I
if we,
have.
and if we have any heavy loads on that road, we would plate it just like they're plating Broadway. But my point to you on the first bullet was that when we transfer fuel, we do not traverse across any of the gas lines.
Okay, it's just such a critical point. Many of us on this Zoom call and beyond, we were protesting the close proximity of the gas line to the nuclear sites. So this is a critical point for us. So please be cognizant of that, sir. Thank you so much.
I can appreciate that.
Hey, Rich, Tom Carey.
Hey, Tom.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Rich, I appreciate your presentation. I think you spoke quite a bit, quite often on safety measures. Can you go back to the slide on the labor issues? There was a slide, Tom.
You know, I apologize. I didn't go over those details. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't know if you skipped over them by accident. And,
No, I
didn't.
Yeah. I didn't. Let me go through it real quick then. So the National Labor Agreement does exist for the electricians, operating engineers, and laborers, as you know, right? And then we have the presidential agreement, but we'll use the National Labor Agreement for demolition and decontamination. And then the presidential agreement that's always existed, I believe, we'll use that for any construction activities. So I do know I've talked to our HR people. We will open up negotiations for the National Labor Agreement come January timeframe, December, January timeframe, next couple months. The UWUA contract expires in January 17th of 22. Negotiations have already started there for our guys there. And I wrote down a note to myself to see when the Teamsters contract expires. I think we have at least a year on that one, and those are our security officers. Then there was a question, I was posed a question about prevailing wage, and that's always applied to workers on site. So I've never seen an issue, or I personally have an issue with any prevailing wage questions. So I apologize. I just jumped down to my notes, so I apologize.
That's okay. Rich, I guess one thing on the prevailing wage, you know, we see it happen all over. They use the quote unquote specialty workers. As you know, being in the field as long as you have, any of us, whether it's the electricians, the operating engineers, Teamsters, steam fitters, when it comes to specialty work, most of the times they'll bring in a company, they'll show us what's got to be done, and then we do it. So it kind of alleviates that, bringing in outside people, so to speak, because our big concern is making sure local labor is used on this entire project. We don't want to see any outside workers if we can help it.
Absolutely.
So when they use that quote specialty workforce, just be cognizant that, look, we built the plant, we can certainly disassemble the plant, right?
Absolutely.
And I was curious on the National Labor Agreement, we have a little concern because, when you talk about safety, there's only three labor, as you see, the electricians, the operating engineers, and the laborers are the only ones signed on to the National Labor Agreement. So it's a concern for myself, Lou Buchanan, and some of the other members that aren't signed on to the NLA that, you don't want me driving a truck. You don't want me playing around with any electrical components, and I'm sure vice versa. I don't want Louis disassembling valves or any of the electricians taking valves apart. And I think it's a big safety concern. So I was curious why the NLA versus the presidential agreement is in existence. I know you said you're going to sit down in January, and I certainly hope that happens.
Okay.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Rich.
No, I could just tell you the way I understand it, and maybe Jason or Joe Delmar could jump in here. The way I understand it is this: job comes through, right? If it's not OE work or electrician work, it goes to the laborers. And then the laborer determines whether or not he could do that task. And if he can't, then he would farm it out to a carpenter or a steam fitter or an ironworker. That's the way it was explained to me. Why other unions are not in the National Labor Agreement? What I was told was, I guess everybody was asked, but not everybody agreed at the time to join it for one reason or another. That was before Holtec really came on site. That National Labor Agreement was in place already. So I could follow up and get some more answers for you, but that's the way I understand it. And if it's a construction activity, we would fall back to the presidential agreement, which would allow for fitters, carpenters, and everybody else to come on site.
That's all. Yeah, I just want the proper craft to be doing the proper jobs.
Absolutely.
You know, when we talk about safety, you know, whenever we work at the plant, you know myself, I'm a steam fitter.
Yep.
And I was a general foreman up on both sites for quite a few years. And I just think about all the training that I needed to do specific tasks on jobs, whether it was rigging or welding or whatever the case was. And I just want to make certain that those qualifications apply to who, you know, the necessary trades for the project. It's a major safety concern.
I agree 100%.
Thank you, Rich.
Could I follow up a little
Rich?
bit on the employment issue? How many people are fully employed right now at the Holtec facility at Indian Point?
If you look at our phase one organization, it's slightly less than 300. We were
300.
slightly less. We were sanctioned to have 312, but a lot of folks have found permanent employee with local jurisdictions, such as Con Edison. So what we've done is we've brought back some of the retirees on a part-time basis to help us out. But from a phase one organization, there's approximately 295 to 300 people. That doesn't include craft union labor that's working on some of the projects, like the enlargement of the equipment hatch, the asphyxie pad, and we've also brought in BHI, which are some RP technicians to help with the transfer of fuel as well as vessel segmentation. So
And
I'd
how
say
many of those?
it kind of varies, but I'd say we're probably close to 400 to 450 people right now.
And how many of those had been former Entergy employees?
The 300.
The 300 of the close to 400.
Correct.
All right.
The exact numbers, but the problem with an exact number is it kind of changes on a day-to-day basis depending on the projects that are being worked. Like we'll bring in more people to do the demolition of those 3 facilities, like I described in the other slide. All right, and then they may only be there for 2 months to get that job done.
Can I just ask on the last point here with prevailing wages applied to non-union specialty workers with no issues? What does with no issues mean?
To me, we've always had prevailing wage here. And so I think there were questions that popped up during while I was putting these slides, I was asked, you know, what's up with prevailing wage? And it's never been an issue here, right? So we've always paid prevailing wage. And that's kind of what I meant by that.
So why don't you change that last line and just put a period after workers?
Sure.
Thank you.
Rich, Bill Smith.
Hi, Bill.
How you doing? I just want to let know that, you know, I have the same concerns as Tom Carey does. And one of my questions are, what work are those non-union specialty workers performing?
I'd have to get back to you.
Okay, I would appreciate that. And also, can we get copies of those agreements that you have? Those national agreements and a presidential agreement?
Sure. Well, let me tie in with, I don't want to commit to that until I talk to the HR people here. I assume I can get them, but I'll say yes for now, but I'll call you if they're not available. How's that?
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Tom, can I chime in very quickly?
Yes, Senator, please do.
I think Bill just raised an excellent point. If we could get periodic reporting from Holtec as to the balance of the unionized workforce versus the non-union jobs, and just an explanation of why former Entergy employees can't do that work. And as he said, there are some very special skill sets that are necessary from time to time, but given our focus on this oversight board and the jobs picture, I think it would be very helpful for us to have a periodic reporting of the breakdown between organized labor, non-labor, and who are outside and who's being brought back.
So when you say non-organized labor, you're talking about management people.
No, when you said there were specialty workers who are being brought in who are not union, or certainly not in the local unions, it would just be helpful for this group to have that breakdown. Whether it's on a quarterly basis or however you want to do it, because I know it's in flux. But that's an issue that we're concerned about, as Bill and Tom raised.
Understood.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Senator.
Hi, Rich. This is John Sipos. I was wondering, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your presentation here. But I had a couple follow-up questions based on your PowerPoint. You mentioned that there was an NRC fire inspection. I guess it was within the last 2 weeks. Do you know the results of that yet?
The results I understand are satisfactory. No violations, no issues.
All right, and there's a upcoming NRC security inspection for November 1st, so that's Monday.
That's correct.
Will you be able to orient the NRC safety or security inspectors towards the pipeline and identify it for them so that they're aware of it as NRC representatives?
I can try, John, but they usually come in with a procedure and a checklist of what they need to look at for that week. I could ask them to look at the pipeline from a security perspective. If they have time, I'm sure they'll do it. But I know they have a procedure and a checklist of things to look at. So I'll ask them. The best I could do is ask.
Okay. Thank you. And you mentioned there was some container fabrication. So I think that's for waste. Sort of waste issues. Can you shed a little bit more light on how that project's going? I know, if I recall, I think Holtec has experienced some advances. Had made progress and realized efficiencies in that area. Is there anything you could tell us today about how that process is going on?
Those cargo containers probably are 3 to 4 years down the line. The exact design of those I'd have to look into, but I know they've designed some for Pilgrim and some for Oyster Creek. So one thing that we do and we take pride in, we do share operating experience, we do share design. So I can get you some of those details too, as far as what the designs look like for the cargo containers for shipment of waste. I can do that.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, I do want to come back to the spent fuel transfer from the spent fuel pools to the dry cask ISIFC storage site on the northern part of the site. And I just want to make sure, I think I heard you. I just want to, I guess, double confirm this, that if there is a spent fuel canister exiting the Unit 2 spent fuel pool, and it is traveling up towards and going to the ISIFC, it is not going to be crossing the green gas pipeline. I mean, is that correct?
That's correct. And to add to that, when we take fuel out of the Unit 3 spent fuel pool building, we will not be traversing across any of the gas lines.
Right, and that's because the straightest quickest way from the Unit 3 spent fuel pool to the Assisi is north, then the pipeline is to the south. It's just, there's no need to cross. There would be no reason to cross that gas pipeline, right?
Exactly. Those gas lines are south of any of the work we have to do with the transport of fuel.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you reiterating that point. Tom, those were my questions.
Thanks, John. Do any other members have questions for Rich? Okay, we are a little over time, so that's good. So I appreciate, Rich, your presentation and being available to us, and appreciate the members' thoughtful questions. As you know, we'll be in touch, and I'm sure we'll be inviting you to another meeting in the very near future. Appreciate your availability.
Looking forward to it. But again, we're also looking forward to anybody who wants to come to Indian Point and really look at how we're proceeding with decommissioning. I think it'll alleviate a lot of the questions people may have.
Thanks, Rich.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, Tom, I think we've covered the open discussion, and I do want to leave enough time for getting to the public statement portion of the meeting. But before I do want one last opportunity for any members to raise any issues on Decommissioning Oversight Board business. I will just make one note that we did receive some public comments with questions written over the last few days. We will endeavor to answer those questions and post written answers online. We received a large packet of information from Manager Green from Clearwater, who's done a lot of research on decommissioning and has been part of the Village's Oversight Board. So I want to thank Manna for sending us that information. It's been distributed to the Decommissioning Oversight Board members. We'll review it. And I think one of the recommendations with that submission was a recommendation to have guest experts present to the Decommissioning Oversight Board. That's been envisioned. I think we are interested in doing that. So there, in a future meeting, we'll likely have some outside experts. So again, just wanted to thank Clearwater for their submission and other members of the public for the comments. One comment in particular I want to highlight is from Daniel Galinko, who was concerned about the early start time. We typically start these meetings at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night, recognizing that people that want to attend have jobs and they're working families. This time we've received requests to start earlier. So we were being responsive to what we thought was a community request to start earlier. But I think in balance, more people are able to participate with a later start time. So I just want to let the board know in the future, we will likely be going back to our later start times. But with that, unless there are any other Decommissioning Oversight Board comments, I want to turn it to the public statement portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Tom. As Tom mentioned, we'd first like to take an opportunity for public statement to those individuals who registered ahead of this meeting. Those individuals will be given the opportunity to speak in the order in which they registered. To provide a fair opportunity to speak, all pre-registered speakers will have a 3-minute time limit. Members of the public will be cut off if they do exceed that time, so please pay attention to the timer that will be put up on the screen. If time allows, members of the public who did not register to make a public statement may be given an opportunity to do so at the end of the session as time allows. Any comments included in the chat function of this meeting are being recorded. A note about presenting public statements is that your line will be unmuted when it is your time to speak. So just wait to hear your name and we have staff who will unmute you. If you pre-registered and you are joining over the phone, please note, as you see on the screen here, to raise your hand by dialing *3 on your phone. That will alert our staff to make sure they are unmuting the correct line. Now, let's move on to the next slide here. So hopefully everyone can see the timer on the screen. The first speaker who registered is Mr. Dan Galinko. Dan, our staff will unmute you, and I'll start the timer when you begin.
Great, thank you, Tom. Can everyone hear?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me on to speak. I'm the co-founder of the Safe Indian Point Demolition Facebook group, which is 170 members now, continuing to grow. Before getting my comments, I do want to thank the Oversight Board for their efforts around safety, and I want to acknowledge David Lockbaum in particular, who's been researching in earnest around a lot of the questions I've raised, so thank you. So obviously, BB Elementary is 4,000 feet from the domes and even less from the natural gas pipelines that could engulf it in a fireball. On the doorstep here of one of the most dangerous and complex demolition projects in the country. So synthesizing my concerns around this project are not easy, to be concise, but simply put, it seems to me that I have to trust everything is going to go exactly as planned to avoid major consequences. There's simply no margin for error at this proximity. When a building is torn down in Midtown Manhattan, it's fully sheathed to prevent airborne particulate or falling debris from injuring bystanders. And I watched as a 50-story tower went down across the street. And believe me, it's meticulously planned, not a single brick free falls, but sheathing is there because in the real world, unforeseen events and circumstances occur. The sheathing is there because it has to be. Indian Point is home to a myriad of carcinogens, and it's not going to be tented during open air demolition. I wonder why in the world it's important for the finance district, but not here. Unforeseen events, machinery fails, engines exploding, structures of debris falling, truck with radioactive waste turning over, someone makes a mistake, heavy equipment strikes the pipeline. You can't get on the site without actually crossing it. A terrorist strikes the pipeline, cyber criminals hit the pipeline, fuel assemblies dropped, truck drivers late for pickup makes a wrong turn and speeds through a school zone. I mean, the list goes on. None of it's science fiction. Holtec has dropped an 18-foot assembly, almost dropped an 18-foot assembly. We only know about it due to a whistleblower that was in 2018. I don't understand why we're turning off the constant interval monitoring. I do want to thank Governor Hochul's office for providing funding for extra monitoring, although I do note that the fish are getting 13 times more funding than the kids. So I hope it's going to be adequate for the real-time monitoring that we're going to need. I don't understand why the plan says there's going to be absolutely no air quality issues. I don't know that anybody could look me in the eye and say there's going to be no dust in this process. It just seems like logic that dust is going to be created. Ultimately, we want a few things to happen before I'm going to be comfortable sending my kids to school, but daily positive assurance of safety. I don't want to know that something happened after it happened. I want to know that the school is safe before they get on the bus in the morning. We would like it tented. We would like the demolition to occur just during the summer for the really dirty stuff that could create that contamination. We want the schools to be able to be deep cleaned and the gas off while the heavy equipment's on top of it. So those are the things that'll make me feel comfortable. And thanks again for the time. I tried to get it all in.
Thank you very much, Dan, and I appreciate you keeping an eye on the time. Next up is Tina Volz-Bongar. Tina, you may need to raise your hand by either if you're on your computer, you should have an option. Otherwise, you could dial *3 if you're calling in from your phone.
This is
All right.
Joe. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. In that case, why don't we move on to Courtney Williams. Courtney, once you're unmuted, we'll go ahead and get started with the 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Courtney Williams from Peekskill. I just wanted to say that I think a lot of the discussion about the pipeline construction really missed the point. The fact that the pipeline was dug up and left unguarded all weekend long, right at the fence line of the nuclear power plant covered in razor wire, shows that the communication between Enbridge and Holtec that is required by the agreement that New York State reached with the NRC is useless.
You're just asking them to communicate. And what that results in is a pipeline dug up and left unguarded. It's great that the 26-inch pipeline was depressurized. It shares a right-of-way with a 30-inch pipeline. Was that pipeline with gas running under the nuclear power plant potentially, was that also depressurized? We don't know. But also, it's not a matter of having a cop on guard for during the day when there's traffic. The point is that there could be tampering or terrorism, and there's nobody there to check. Nobody knows to watch. Why would they not have a guard on site until after the public makes a stink about it? What's going to happen when it's behind the fence and we don't get to see it? Holtec has a track record of hiding incidents, as the previous speaker mentioned. DPS and other New York State agencies still have not resolved the issues that they raised in the New York State risk assessment of the pipeline at Indian Point. And now that risk is changing because of decommissioning. Why is gas flowing under the nuclear power plant when New York State agencies know that the risk assessment was reverse engineered for an approval, and why are they allowing this decommissioning to proceed? Mr. Congdon, you told me yourself that Enbridge cannot shut off the gas in 3 minutes. That's the entire basis of the approval of this gas pipeline. You have known for years that it cannot be shut off, yet no one is taking action to turn off the gas. So I would ask that basically now at this point, step up and stop protecting the corporations like Enbridge and Holtec and Spectra and Entergy, and start protecting the public. We have been at this for 7 years, and you have been more of a hindrance than a help. You have been insulating these corporations from their wrongdoing and being complicit in putting this community in danger. And I know you don't like when I say this, and you don't want to meet with me and my allies because you feel unappreciated, because you think you're doing your job well, but quite frankly, that's absurd. So I would ask for you to do the right thing. Stop being cogs in a wheel for Entergy and Enbridge and start being a wrench in a wheel for the public and push for change. We need this gas shut off now. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. And again, thank you for keeping to the 3 minutes. It's appreciated by, I'm sure, all members of the public to give everyone an opportunity to speak. Next up, we have Ron Leonard.
Ron might have fallen off. I don't see him anymore. He could possibly have called back in.
Okay, and we will try and circle back with folks if we're not seeing them on the line right now. So for now, let me ask, is Teresa Cardos with us? You can either raise your hand. Oh, we actually have a hand raised, Joe, if you can review that.
I've unmuted the line. I can't tell who it is, but I've unmuted the line. 723. I think this is Teresa. Is this Teresa? Hello, you've been unmuted. There's no one speaking.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Ramsey Salcido. Apologies, I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Salcedo, yes, thank you.
Salcedo, thank you.
All right, my name is Ramsey Salcedo. I'm a resident of Cortland. Thank you for sharing the logistics of monitoring efforts by the Oversight Board and Holtec. Yeah, I appreciate us keeping Holtec honest with the citizen participation plan and the scoping work plan. And I'd like to thank Holtec for providing specificity in regulatory compliance affairs and the monitoring logistics. As a Cortland resident, safety and the tax loss is it's my primary concern. But as a radiochemist, safety takes the cake. So when it comes to monitoring and various short-lived isotopes, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same footing when it comes to detecting and then alerting the appropriate authorities if there is anything above background. So I like to see that there's a good effort being made in systematically looking at possible contamination pathways at the plant and then vectors of transport. You know, the last comment I'd like to make is I've made comments on the record via the online comment board, and those are more specific in terms of questions to be answered. But one thing I didn't include was just a question in regards to the possibility that not spent nuclear fuel, but rather contaminated material may traverse the gas line. I understand that spent nuclear fuel will not, but heavy machinery might. I just want to be clear that heavy machinery isn't, you know, carrying a container with contaminated metal or plastic or something of the nature that again is radiological in nature now because of contamination, but doesn't meet the definition of fuel and pose some sort of safety hazard with going over a line. I don't know the geography of the facility, and I don't know if that's possible, but that is a concern. That while spent nuclear fuel won't traverse it, some other radiological material might. But again, it's my hope that we keep making good faith efforts and just keeping communication open, not just with the oversight board, but with the community in general. And it's naive to hope, but you know, it's something that I think just would ease a lot of concern if we're just making good faith efforts and just keeping everyone updated, not just on technical reports and activity reports, but just progress reports as well. So thank you again to the Oversight Board and to Holtec for the specificity in today's presentation.
Thank you, Ramsey. Next up, we have Marie and Sarah.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I would like to bring up one or two procedural questions really. I'm wondering if it's not possible for everyone to be made aware of the next planned meeting at each one of the meetings so that it's not really sort of a mystery until the date is actually upon us. And also whether you'll be answering questions that are in the chat. There may be some questions that I'd like to put in there. I would like to indicate my complete support for the comments made so eloquently by Courtney Williams several minutes ago. I really feel strongly that we need an independent pipeline expert at the table. And also would love to see a grassroots community environmental representative as well. I'm concerned about some of the comments that were made regarding in the Holtec presentation regarding the possibility of not running any weights over any of the transport over the pipelines. I think that's really a reach to think that we could anticipate that so clearly. And I wonder, in the event that there would be a transport, there was a comment about the steel plates, and I wonder the weight of one of those vehicles loaded with some fuel, spent fuel, versus the tensile strength of a steel plate. I have my concerns about that, as well as anything that's being run down Route 9 on the local roadways that may be containing what's been referred to as a low-level waste. And I think that I'm not quite clear what that low-level waste is and what its destination is. So those are my concerns. Thank you very much.
This is the court reporter. Can I get her last name again?
Insera, I-N-S-E-R-R-A.
I'm sorry, what was it again?
I-N-S-E-R-R-A.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Ellen Weininger.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to make a couple of points here. The pipeline's approval in the first place was based on false representations that were confirmed by extensive documents from nuclear pipeline and medical disaster experts and were confirmed by the OIG's report from the NRC. That alone should close the pipeline. Now that decommissioning activities are underway, which would exacerbate the catastrophic risks that have been outlined extensively by those experts, all the more reason to shut the pipelines. According to PHMSA, their own statement is excavation damage is a leading cause of natural gas and hazardous liquids pipeline failure incidents. So I'd like to read the statement from Dr. Erwin Redlener, who is the former director of National Center for Disaster Preparedness at Columbia. With the release of the risk analysis and letter to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission calling for urgent action, New York State agencies confirmed the catastrophic risk posed to millions of lives by the co-location of the high-pressure pipelines at the aging Indian Point nuclear facility. We strongly agree that close proximity of the pipelines to critical safety infrastructure and to highly radioactive nuclear fuel stored on site is a persistent and significant threat. This is particularly alarming as we have seen an increase in pipeline failure rates, especially in newly constructed pipelines. To make matters worse, decommissioning and decontamination work anticipated will certainly involve heavy excavation, which may well further jeopardize pipeline integrity. From a public health point of view, the flow of gas at Indian Point presents an enormous risk to communities and families throughout the region. Shutting down this gas flow should happen immediately in order to avert the possibility of a catastrophic explosion that would have widespread, deadly consequences in our region. Please heed the experts. They've spoken out extensively. The Public Service Commission and this Decommissioning Oversight Board should collectively send a notification to PHMSA calling for a corrective action order to shut these pipelines while these activities are proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have John Sullivan.
Hello.
Hi, John, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. John Sullivan, Peekskill, New York. Thank you for your efforts to keep us safe. Let's hope this works. So I got the notification through a friend. So my what I'd ask is that the PSC consider setting up a specific page on their website to deal with DOB issues, deal with notification of future meetings. Also, notification of meetings or consults that different agencies are having in between meetings. I don't want anybody to, if they feel there's an emergency, feel that they have to notify the public prior to, but it'd be nice to know if something happens afterwards. So, but more transparency would be great. Also, when this came up about the pipe being exposed this past weekend, if there was a number that we could contact, I believe probably the folks that were aware of it probably contacted Assemblywoman Gallup and Senator Harkin's office, which is probably how this got done. But if there was a specific number that we could go to, I understand there's a number for people, a tip line for workers, but there should be a number for members of the public to talk to get, and then not to be referred to Enbridge or to Holtec, but rather that the DOB takes this as their whatever. I would like David at some point to present what the shortcomings are of the Reuters-Stokes, and he kind of made an allusion to it, that at some point that you need to consider different types of monitoring as the circumstances change. And I do hope to take Mr. Barone up on a tour of the plant. I do think that the pictures that were used in the presentation were file pictures. That ground looked really green and nice. And if that happened within the last few days, I'm going to hire these folks to do my gardening for me. So anyway, thank you. Thank you again. Okay. And also I'm up, I think I registered on the phone, and so you can take my name off the phone list. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up, we have Susanna Glidden.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. So, Mr. Congdon and task force and DOB members, thank you for your efforts to keep us safe. You are an extremely important body of people doing that. I'm a longtime environmentalist and co-founder of Stop the Algonquin Pipeline Expansion. We oppose the unacceptably dangerous and illegitimate approval of siting Algonquin's massive AIM pipeline at Indian Point next to its two other pipelines under the plant's property. And we're aghast that it became operational, is still running, in spite of Holtec now having begun the decommissioning process. But my matter with you today, please, is on a different issue. The DOB has failed to appoint as two of its members what several dozen advocates and elected officials have called for, and we would greatly appreciate this error corrected this evening without further delay. We must have, as DOB members, the appointment of an environmental justice community member, as well as a responsible and knowledgeable community representative for communication regarding Algonquin pipeline activities. And we have the combination of both of those requirements in the single personhood of Dr. Courtney Williams, who you've heard from a bit earlier, who is also a resident of Peekskill. Her impeccable credentials are well known. They were submitted to you for her DOB membership quite a while ago. She's a PhD research scientist and a Yale and Princeton graduate. My longtime Westchester County legislator and now my state senator, Pete Harcum, as well as Assembly member Sandy Galiff, both requested her inclusion, as well as all of us environmental advocates. We'd like it done now, please. We must have a community voice who we trust at the table, representing these two basic concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next we have Catherine Skopik.
Hey, Tom, this is Joe. Can we see if Catherine called in? She could hit *3 on her phone and it would raise her hand.
Joe, are you checking out those phone lines?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. And I'm getting an echo on my end. I don't know if you're able to check on open mics.
Sure, I can do that. I see a call-in user. Do you want me to unmute them, Tom?
Yes, please. Let's see.
Go ahead. You've been unmuted.
This is Manna Green. You can't tell who you are seeking.
If you.
Manna, we do hear you.
Is this better?
Yes, we can hear you clear.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to say that many people on present at the Decommissioning Oversight Board meeting and on the call are aware that Clearwater sent over a series of recommendations. And I want to say that quite a few of our concerns were actually addressed. Some remain unaddressed. And we did send a list of experts. And I'm delighted to hear Dr. Erwin Redlener cited, and I absolutely think that we should hear directly from Rick Kuprowitz. So one of my remaining questions is about soil cleanup. I put that in the chat. I don't know whether I can get an answer tonight, but in addition to the groundwater contamination, the soil is contaminated, and in the PSDAR, I believe that very minimal remediation was planned. And my other question is that Holtec talked about over-the-road transport of components, but also possibly over time high-level radioactive waste assemblies. And they specified road to rail, but there was also reference in the PSDAR about potentially building an expanded dock for water transport of waste down the Hudson River through New York Harbor to a rail line in New Jersey. So those are my two questions for now. And I also, with the time remaining, want to say that the question of storage systems, the currently proposed and in use Holtec thin-walled canister going into a larger concrete silo or cask. There are many questions about that, and I would strongly like to urge a working group that includes people that are not just already on the Decommissioning Oversight Board to explore that, not just for Indian Point, but for the good of the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Manajo. Next up is Amy Rosemarin. Amy, our staff will try and find you, but please raise your hand by pressing *3 on your phone. Joe, I see a hand raised.
I see a few hands raised.
User 47.
User 47. Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You can hear me now? Great.
Yes.
I have two questions. And the first is, if the major safety feature of the pipeline is not functioning, i.e. they can't shut it in 3 minutes from an event, or even 3 minutes way later from the time of notification, why is it legal to allow the gas to flow? That's my first question. And my second question is, this is Tom, if you were notified that a missile was headed to the pipeline, or there was some other imminent danger and a fast decision had to be made to shut the gas, who would you contact to turn off the gas? Which agency has that authority, and what is the process? And I'll give the rest of my time to you to answer those two questions. Hello?
Well, yes, we'll answer all the questions in writing. We'll take down the questions just to briefly talk about the operation and shutdown of the line. The operator of the line controls the flow of gas on the line, and they have the capacity from their control room to remotely close valves.
Right, but if you had to make a fast decision, like there was some imminent danger, who do you call? Who do you call to turn off the gas? Who is it that is able to, like in the PSC, call them, or does it have to go through some agency? But could you call Holtec? I mean, Enbridge, and say turn the gas off right now? Do you have that ability?
Our gas safety personnel in the field, if they saw an event, would certainly be able to contact the company directly to inform them of those kinds of risks.
So if there was like if a missile were headed toward the pipeline and you had to do something fast, then what would you do? What would you do?
Our gas safety personnel has all of the relevant contact information of the operators of all the interstate pipelines, and they would inform the operators of pipelines of any known information that would jeopardize the safe operation of their facilities.
So that means like somebody from the PSC is able to say to Enbridge, shut the gas right now.
Somebody
Is that
from
correct?
someone from our Department of Public Service gas safety personnel, if they had verifiable information, would share that information with the operator. And the operator has the ability to act on information that is verified information to keep their operations safe. I don't want to get into this back and forth. We took your question and we'll provide further information in our written responses to the Q&A.
And we are at time as well, so thank you very much. Now, let me just quickly see. There is a Dan Riley who registered, but we have no registration information to go off of. Is there a Dan Riley who can press *3?
Do I have your permission to lower the hands and then ask for Dan to raise his hand, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, Dan, please raise your hand.
I am not.
Tom, this is Joe. I'm not seeing any raised hands.
I did just see a hand go up at the very last moment here.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Okay, we'll see if this is him. Go ahead, you've been unmuted. No one's speaking.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I must have been on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Who is this?
Okay, this is Michelle Lee, L-E-E. Just a couple of things. Since a lot of people had trouble figuring out how to get access to raise hands and so forth on the system, I think it would be helpful for future meetings to do a cursory review of the whole WebEx thing, which a lot of us struggle with for some reason. Anyway, so that's the procedural point. My main point, and I did file with the DOB comments that were submitted to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission regarding the PSDAR that Holtec had submitted. So that should be on your webpage to read. But 2 points I want to highlight here. We have a federal regulator, the NRC, which is, as an institution, is really a poster child for regulatory capture. But the inspectors at the NRC are really pretty much exemplary. So what I'm going to ask is really, to the extent possible, and I hope it's vigorous, that the DOB use its clout to urge the NRC to keep a resident inspector at the site. Once in a while, inspections are very nice, but it's very different when somebody is really there, on a regular basis and gets to pick up on things and have casual conversations with people and so forth, as I'm sure you're well aware. The second thing I would ask the DOB to do is use whatever powers that you have, and it could be a bully pulpit, which is often very effective, to urge the NRC inspections to be go back to the level of detail they used to be. The process that the NRC has set up for inspections and publication of inspections during decommissioning is very either non-existent to very limited, and really for a site like Indian Point, that's completely inappropriate. And it's also a problem with respect to providing information for the many different reactor sites throughout the nation that are going to be decommissioned in coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom, that is the list of public statements that we've received.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you to all the Decommissioning Oversight Board members and the Indian Point Closure Task Force for a very productive meeting. We got a lot of very good questions during the public statement process, and I think we will endeavor to get answers to the questions we heard up on our website. And again, appreciate everyone's active involvement and engagement. This concludes our meetings of the Indian Point Closure Task Force and Decommissioning Oversight Board. We will be in touch with all the Decommissioning Oversight Board members on scheduling the next meeting, and we will make that meeting date known in a public notice on our website with as much advance notice as possible. We hear the comments. I do want to make sure people are aware we do have a landing page on our website. It's at the Department of Public Service website, www.dps.ny.gov. All of the materials and correspondence related to the Indian Point Closure Task Force and Decommissioning Oversight Board are available there. The comments that we get during these public statement portions of the meeting, we're endeavoring to answer those questions, and we will post that information at this site. Tom, is there any other business?
No, there's no other business before us today.
Okay. Again, thanks all very much. We're adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
We're off the record.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.